I am Raziel.
All right, let's get started. Everybody, welcome to episode 6 of RNR DND. And once again, we have Josh Strife Hayes as a guest here. And today's topic is RNG, everyone's favorite part of gaming, RNG. And I figured it would be really good to pull Josh in on this one because I imagine he's going to have some interesting things to say. So if you're not familiar with the show, if this is your first time watching, this is our MMO-centered podcast where we talk mostly about issues in MMOs, features in MMOs, things like that. We've gone over several things such as nostalgia, the meta, which we barely even touched the tip of the iceberg on that because that can go extremely deep. But this is episode 6, so please welcome. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us today. Please be safe while you're out there. We know everybody's going through a pretty shit time right now, and we totally get it. So come watch us while you're in your quarantine. Come and what else are you gonna do? Right? Sit in your fort made out of toilet paper? That's boring. Come and watch. But I am Raziel. You can see all of our information is below. We have Josh up there, and then we have Romagus on the show as well. So Josh, how you doing, man?
Not too bad. Not too bad at all, mate. Exactly as you said, I'm from the UK, and we are in lockdown right now, in quarantine. So everyone is staying in their houses. All non-essential services are pretty much off. So I'm probably doing the same way that the majority of the nerds and the geeks in the world are doing, and that's not much has changed. The government say, stay in your house. I'm like, one step ahead of you, mate.
Yeah.
Already there. Or I'd have to be more social to hit the minimum social guidelines of what they're saying.
It's like, dude, you just want to tell the government, I already hate people, so I don't interact with anybody, so I'm fine.
You give me an excuse to stay and play video games.
I'm not going to be
I've been training for this.
Romagus, how you doing, man? Doing good, dude. You kind of sound like you want to kill yourself, how you just said that. You good? You solid, man? Oh, okay. There you go. All right. We're good. So, RNG, I'm really curious because right when we started doing the notes for this episode, Romagus, the first thing you sent out to me was just the statement, I'm not much of a fan of RNG, but I'm open to some hidden knowledge that might be derived from it. So I'm curious what your stance is before we start digging in.
Every single situation where I've felt where RNG could be implemented, I always think, no, you could do it better, right? So, like for example, just by like in video games and just games in general, you just increase the amount of variables of things that you can control, and then there are only so many things that the human brain can actually keep track of. But as long as all of those things like have a set pattern, there's really no point in having randomness. Like for example, racing games.
Sure.
Like the track always stays the same. The car doesn't randomly, change speed.
Well, unless the game's developed by EA, then it does.
Yeah, right. Yeah, catch up mechanics. And so like you have to be going a certain speed while going into a turn. If you're not going that speed, then the turn won't work. And then there's playing the game in between that. Another example would be, here's a stupid example, but it gives the illusion of randomness, which is a game like QWOP, right? Where you control every part of a human body in order to get the runner across the finish line. And you use Q, W, O, and P to do so. You control both the arms and the legs and the physics, guide the body across. Now, it's really difficult to actually pull off. And I've never seen a QWOP game run smoothly, but there's nothing random about it, right? But it looks random, right? So the only time I ever notice RNG is when it rears its ugly head. And just to be safe, like just to be clear for the audience, is RNG stands for random number generator.
Right.
So I get the idea. It's supposed to come from Dungeons and Dragons and rolling the dice. And
all board games, really, if you look at it,
of
my initial idea was going to be that if you look at it, I mean, RNG is in pretty much almost every board game. Josh has his dice out, yeah.
I've got dice ready for this discussion.
Almost every board game that's ever existed. I mean, Monopoly, just even like dumb games like the game of Life, you know, like I'm not talking about Our Lives, like the board game Life.
Right.
Any game where you have like cards that you have to pick or spots you land on randomly. I mean, RNG, it's all random. While in gaming, RNG didn't really become too heavy of a thing until MMORPGs. Because if you look at RPGs, like the single player Final Fantasy games, the Zelda games, so little RNG, if any, is in those games. Like it's, if there's an item you're going after, you'll go get it when you get to that part of the game. Critical hit, sure, but that I wouldn't necessarily view that as RNG as that statistical likelihood. I mean, it is RNG, but what I'm saying is it's not an entire system. It's and you can increase your odds if you keep leveling up your character and you get better crit chance. The chance you're going to get a crit goes up and up and up. Well,
then that becomes the game, right?
Right.
You start instead of playing the game with, you know, set parameters in mind, you end up controlling the odds instead, which is a game in and of itself. It turns it into poker.
But what I'm saying is entire systems based around RNG have made their way dramatically into MMOs to make them function, to stretch content out, to last mainly, longer. In some, now I think I'm not on here saying RNG is bad, always bad, because it's not. RNG can be really good, but there's very good and there's very bad.
That's what I'm interested in hearing, right? Because from my experience, I've never had a good experience. Like I never have, like, so for example, like with loot drops, right?
Right.
Like let's say I beat a boss for the first time, and the thing that I dropped the first time dropped. That's kind of expected. Like I don't feel good about that. It's like, oh, cool, my loot dropped. Right now, when I fight that boss 20 times in a row and win 20 times in a row, and it doesn't drop at all, and I don't see it, and then on the 21st time I do see it, but then I lose the loot roll to some other guy who's trying to get it for his alt, right? So, and then I have to go another 20 times before I even see it again, right?
Well,
I don't see. Nowhere does RNG in that way help me feel good in any way.
Well, before we get into the good and bad, before we dive too deep, Josh, I want to get your opinion on the whole RNG as a concept here.
Okay, my background comes from Dungeons and Dragons and then heavily MMORPG stuff. So I'm going to make a strange statement here, and then I'm going to justify it. Okay. RNG is not as random as people think. RNG is often a number generated within set parameters. So if I roll a d6 or a six-sided dice, I'm going to generate a number between 1 and 6. Every number has an equal chance, but it's not necessarily super random. I'm never going to get a 7 on a six-sided dice. Correct. So when I'm playing a video game and a random number is generated, it's not as random as the game wants me to think. It is within a set parameter. It will be from a minimum value to a maximum value. Now, true random in nature follows patterns, and random in video games does not. This is a really weird, ironic thing. If I flip a coin 1,000 times, the chance of me getting 1,000 heads in a row is exactly the same as me getting absolutely any other combination of heads and tails flips. Every single individual flip is its own individual chance. They create patterns that a human would look at and say, there's a pattern there. There's a pattern there. Human brains are predisposed to notice patterns in things. It's why we look at clouds and see faces in them. It's why we spot patterns in anything we see. Now, random number generation in video games is actually specifically planned to avoid these type of patterns, which ironically means it's not completely random. It would be absolutely possible for you to kill a boss in an MMORPG and get the rarest drop that boss could possibly give every single time you kill it from now until the end of time. That is statistically possible. But most games have built-in fail-safes to make sure this can't happen. Because in the odds that it did happen, the economy would suffer. The actual boss would have no reason to be killed. So it's extremely odd that random number generation is always number generation within a set parameter that is often governed by a set of rules that make sure it's never quite truly random. It's always random enough that there isn't a pattern, but it's not random enough to make sure there is a pattern. It's very, very strange. They will look at it and go, there's been a lot of number ones, let's add a number two.
I'd almost call it because I have the same thought. I've had the same thought process, and I've almost consider it, instead of considering everything RNG, I consider it MNG, where it's a manipulated number generator. So
that's a good way of putting
it. There's weighted dice essentially, and the weight can change. How weighted each die can change depends on
drop rate.
What the what the developers have programmed into that dice, what the need is. There's a lot of games that have like what they call bad luck protection, where they say if you get screwed over X amount of times, Terra is a good example of this. Terra and Black Desert Online, where when you're upgrading your gear at endgame, every time you fail, it increases the odds that you won't fail the next time.
They're called fail stacks, and the more fail stacks you have, the less chance of failing.
Right. Now, where I really want to
14 system where like you do a run and you get like a currency of some kind, and you can and 14 uses totems, and so if you do a run 100 times, you will get what you're trying to get, or in those 100 times, it could just drop. Right. So in my opinion, that's the most positive way.
Well, interestingly enough, games like World of Warcraft used to do that with their Valor system back in Wrath of the Lich King and Burning Crusade, when you would have you wouldn't be able to buy the items the boss drops, but you could buy equally powerful items with the currency that you obtained from repeatedly beating that content. But where I think RNG is the worst, in MMORPGs at any rate, where it doesn't belong, and where it does belong in another genre, which is the action-adventure RPG, so like Diablo, Path of Exile, stuff like that, is there should be no RNG in stats on items. I think that is when you start layering the cake so thick that it can really demoralize your player base. The reason why it works in games like, Diablo, is because a single run of content will take you maybe 5 to 10 minutes. And in that 5 to 10 minute window, you will gain 30, 40, you'll complete 50 pieces of gear, completely fill your inventory during that quick end game run. And yeah, the majority of that gear is going to be shit that you don't want, but it doesn't really matter because you're not locked out of the gear. You can keep doing that content over and over and over and over again. And so you could farm it indefinitely. There's no limits. So having randomly rolled stats on your gear works just fine in that genre. In a genre like World of Warcraft or MMOs, it falls flat on its face. And we can see that with how people have reacted to things like Warforged, Titan Forging in World of Warcraft, where you have one piece of gear that has the same exact name as another piece of gear. They're identical pieces of gear that drop from the same boss. The only difference is one got lucky and rolled higher stats or a gem slot. And then there's even the chance that lucky piece could have rolled even luckier and rolled more item levels and more stats and more gem slots. And stuff like that is a very blatant way to increase the longevity of the content of your game, because it's the infinite carrot on a stick, but it's not interesting in any way, shape, or form. Josh, what do you think of this?
To go back just a few moments to when you talked about RNG being manipulated in Terra, I want to just really quickly add in an example where RuneScape managed to completely mess it up. If I'm in a group of people in RuneScape and we're killing a boss and the boss dies and the person who did the most DPS or the most damage gets a good drop, it was discovered that every other person that was physically close to that player has a hidden variable in their own character increased hugely, which effectively means you are now owed a good drop. You didn't get this one, but you're owed another one. So what would happen is you'd go to a boss with a group of people. As soon as one person got a good drop, the group would then disband, and every individual person would then go and solo whatever highest boss they could, knowing their chance of getting a drop was then really, really high.
They rigged
so it
themselves.
wasn't RNG so much as what you said, it was manipulated number generation. We could manipulate it. I think what you just said now ties really nicely into what Remay just said. You said earlier, Remay, just that you didn't like it when you killed a boss 20 times and you didn't get something. And that's because in the MMORPG genre, what we get is compared to what other people get. We have to look at what you've got, what I've got, what other people have got. That's where Warforging and Titan Forging made a mistake. But with action games, action RPG games, Diablo, Path of Exile, stuff like that, even though there are other people playing, we're not as concerned about comparing our numbers directly to them because skill has a large part in these games as well. When skill is a huge part, we can make up for crappy RNG with our own gameplay. When we come into Titan Forging and Warforging, the idea that similar items can have different stats, you mentioned a carrot on a stick. It's very true. It's an endless treadmill with a, hey, this could be good, hey, this could be better, hey, that could be even better. If you know that there is no end to the best thing, if you know there is no actual end in sight to having the best thing, especially as an MMORPG player, which are probably players that spend more time than usual trying to get best in slot, we're going to get burnt out. We're going to look and say, I will never finish this. This will never, ever be complete. We are collectible people. We are collectathon lovers. There's a reason MMOs have achievement diaries and have special journals to achieve stuff. You know, you got it, you got it, you got it, you got it. We want the best things. And if we can never get those, we're going to look at what we've got, no matter how good it is, and think, it's crap. Yep. I could get a +3 weapon, you get a weapon that's +3.1, and suddenly I'm thinking, mine's crap. Mine's not crap, it's +3, but it's crap compared to yours. And seeing as there's no end to these numbers, everything is ultimately just waiting to be crap.
Well, and it's...
I don't mind that personally. Like, that's not my problem with it. The boss drops a certain thing for my class. I want that thing. It has nothing to do with other people, right? So, for example, they did do something like that in Final Fantasy XIV with the Diadem. They actually released a random number generated stat weapon that was 5 item levels higher than the highest weapon you could get at the time. And a lot of people were really pissed about that. But me personally, that's not how I play the game.
Romagus is generally the odd man out when it comes to numbers stuff. He definitely isn't motivated in the same way most MMO players are.
Well, because I see it as like the content that is meant to be played. If you're beating the hardest boss already, all you're doing from that point on is beating it more efficiently. And the drops that you get are just proof that, yes, I can do the hardest content. Right. Having the stats isn't as important as being able to actually beat the content.
Sure, and I agree with that. But to your point, Josh, it gets the problem you just described gets infinitely worse if someone can get that gear that you're talking about, the 3.1, right? Let's say you did the hardest, you're chasing that stick, that carrot, and then you get the 3.0 damage sword off the boss finally, right? And you're like, I got it. You know it could roll better, but you're like, it's okay, it's not a big deal. I've got the sword. I killed the hardest boss in this content to get it. And then the guy who has the 3.1 just picked up his 3.1 randomly from a chest somewhere out or in the open world. Or a world quest, and it took him no effort. Like, he just walked by and clicked a button. That's even more...
Or even worse. Even worse is if he bought it, right?
Right. Or if he paid real life money for it and got out of a loot box, right? So that RNG makes it even worse because it's like, he was extremely lucky to have gotten that good of an item from a random world drop or a random world quest that takes no effort to do. Certainly not as much effort and organization as killing a raid boss would. But he got it. And that makes your 3.0 suck that much worse because you're like, I put in all this hard work and effort to get this, and he got something better, like literally just picking his nose. Like, he didn't have to do anything.
See, I actually completely agree with Romagus when he says that skill should beat numbers. It's the reason, and I'll mention this every single video I ever do, it's the reason Dark Souls is one of my favorite game series. If you have the skill, you don't need the numbers. The numbers are increased based on your skill. If you have a mediocre weapon, someone has a better weapon, doesn't matter. Your skill is going to come into play. Your skill is going to beat theirs.
Sure.
The reason that I start to hate RNG is because I like knowing that I can min-max if I want to. It's not something that I do all the time, it's not something I focus on too much, but as a Dungeons & Dragons player, as a Warhammer player, as an MMORPG player, I like knowing I can look at the maths and solve it like a puzzle if I want to. I can say, put that number there, that item there, that's theoretically the cap. But when skill is effectively removed from the equation, I'll use the example of Black Desert Online. If you have the best items in Black Desert Online, it does not matter how skillful your opponent is. If they don't have anywhere near your gear, you'll beat them. It doesn't matter how much skill you've got in these games if numbers will absolutely wreck you. And RNG comes into play as a huge negative if it can reward players for no skill and then allow them to beat skill through pure luck. I think that skill should always beat numbers. I completely agree with that. It's just a shame that RNG changes that system.
No, yeah, I agree completely. I think skill should always trump any kind of numbers you have. And I'm with you in terms of, I'm one of those players when I played, I wanted to get best in slot. I wanted to get the best stuff because, yeah, I wanted to get better skill wise, but I also wanted to be as efficient as possible at the same time. And I knew efficiency takes time to get to. I knew having the best of the best, and I wasn't in a rush. I was like, I'm just gonna, I still want the best stuff, but you got to fight RNGesus. You gotta do all these things. And which is okay, but if you've noticed, the more MMOs have pushed more layers of RNG. So RNG on top of RNG on top of RNG. Those MMOs right now are doing rather poorly. People get burnt out faster when they play these games. People a lot of times won't even start because they'll say, "What's the point? I can't catch up now." I mean, it's like a huge casino. And then it gets even worse with a lot of these games in their cash shops where they add in even more RNG on cosmetics. In my opinion, cosmetics I get that for cash shop, people are like, it's just cosmetic. It has no effect on the game. I'm like, yes, but by removing cosmetics from the base game and putting them into a cash shop with RNG, you've just got rid of a ton of content people could normally chase through natural means in a game. Yeah. And now it's just floating out there for money.
With aesthetic items like that, like I think that's one of the things that's another way in which an artist can get money for work that isn't necessary, right? So you have your base game, which everyone can play for $60 or whatever, and then, like, for example, something like paid mods. Right. Now, paid mods is a shitty concept, I think, when it comes from Bethesda. But I think Valve has created an entire marketplace based off of people making their own. And see, the thing is Valve doesn't get paid for the paid mods.
Right. And this is where I'm going to call out Final Fantasy 14, man.
The mods.
I think it's bullshit that Final Fantasy 14 has a store. I think it's bullshit that World of Warcraft is a store. The reason why is because they're both subscription. You have to buy the copies of the game, you have to buy the expansions to the game, and you have to pay a monthly subscription. If you have a game that's free to play, you just pick it up, download it. I'm completely fine with them having a cash shop as long as it's not, hey, buy this and you're a god in the game and you can kick anyone's ass. But if they're like, hey, buy all this cosmetic stuff because we have to make money somehow to keep making this product for you, then yeah, that makes sense, and I'm fine with that. But companies that have cash shops that have a subscription model, that's bullshit to me, especially because if people say, yeah, well, it's expensive expensive to maintain a game, and I'm like, no, it is, but that's a horseshit excuse because EverQuest never did that. I don't know if they do it now, but EverQuest never did that. Assurance Call never did that. Dark Age Camelot never did that. EverQuest 2 never did that. The first 3 iterations of WoW never did that.
A lot of people didn't drive cars until they were invented. So
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Though, is the excuse of it costs money and it's the only way we'll survive is bullshit.
Well, I don't think it's a survival thing. I think it's more of like this is how we track. This is how we can gouge whether people want it. Well, it's only gouging if they're forced to pay for it. If they're not forced to pay for it, see, there's another big problem too. I think it was with people in general is that a lot of people buy shit that they don't need. Right?
Everyone buys shit they don't need.
They feel like they need to have this shit that they don't need when literally the fact is they don't need it. And it gets to the point, and I think this is specifically a problem with American consumerism, is that I got to have this, I got to have this, got to have this. No one has actually lived in the state of nature.
Right. We spend money we don't have on things we don't need to impress people we don't like who don't come over and get impressed.
Exactly. And I think people really need to get their like. I remember the concept of paying monthly for a game in the first place was asinine. I remember when I first played Final Fantasy XI, my goal was to find a way to beat the game within a month. So I didn't have to pay
This is the initial cost.
It's just exactly.
Good fucking luck, dude. Beat Final Fantasy XI in 30 days.
I know, right? Exactly.
They're very optimistic, Romagus.
But now it's changed, right? Like now my mentality is like, oh, this is, and like for example, if you wanted to have another character in 11, you had to pay $1 extra a month. And so what I ended up doing is I used to get a brownie every single day that cost $1. And I was like, well, if I just stop eating brownies, then I could just easily afford 30 of these characters a month, right? If you know,
yeah.
And so that's kind of how I viewed it.
But
that was my own way of looking at how to keep my finances in order. There are a lot of people that don't keep their own finances in order.
Dude, I know people in my guild that play. I know people in my guild that play Destiny 2 still, and one of the big things with Destiny 2 right now is the fact that the Bungie's pushing their cash shop so hard. Like most of the best looking stuff in the game is in the cash shop. And I heard this guy, like the justification's out of control, because you heard a guy in my Discord, and he was talking about how like, well, I played this game for like, 1,000 hours now, and I paid this, $60 like everybody did to buy the game, but I'm completely okay with the fact that I've also spent like another 500 over the last year buying things in the cosmetic shop because of how many hours I'm getting out of the game. And I was like, you spent $500 on pixels that if that server ever goes down, they're gone. You don't have those anymore. Right. Exactly. Like you're done. You're an idiot. Essentially is what I wanted to say. But I'm like, dude, to each their own. But I don't know, Josh, what do you think about? I know we kind of veered off the track to going into microtransactions into RNG, but what are your thoughts on this?
There are two main levels that I want to kind of spike off from here and see where we can go to when we talk about random number generation. There's two main kind of parts we can look at. There's RNG to win and RNG as the reward itself. Now, for example, as a pretty big Magic the Gathering player, I'm no stranger to RNG. You go, you buy a pack of Magic cards, you buy a booster pack for a few quid, and suddenly I know that I am rolling the dice, I am playing the RNG game within a set parameter, potentially getting a certain card. If I buy a pack in the game, if I buy a booster pack, if I buy a loot box, RNG is being rolled again. I might get something there, I might not. But this is an interesting thing. Why, have you guys ever seen those mystery boxes?
Oh, yeah.
You go to a thing, you pay 10 quid a month or whatever, you get sent a mystery box.
Yeah.
The reason they exist is because what's in the box is crap. What's in the box is worth 3 or 4 quid. The reason they can't just sell the box, and don't worry, this does have a point, this is making sense in a second. The reason they sell the box for more money than the value of stuff the box contains is because of the aspect of mystery. You're not actually buying the items in the box. If the items in the box were any good, you'd be happy to pay for them. You are buying the potential, the mystery, the maybe. So when you go and kill a boss with RNG, you're getting the maybe. It might be there, it might not be there. When you open anything in the game that has an RNG, the excitement doesn't necessarily come from the drop itself, it comes from the potential of there being
the dopamine rush.
Exactly, the dopamine rush of being there. The big problem with RNG is when achieving it makes you so much more powerful than everyone else, or not achieving it makes you so much worse than everyone else. RNG is used too much within the game that allows too much variation within the playstyles. I personally think that RNG should be included with stuff that doesn't necessarily affect gameplay. You talked about cosmetics earlier. If there were 3 versions of a knife, and every single version of the knife had exactly the same stats in the game, but there were 3 different looking versions, with 2 of them having a 45% chance of a drop and one having a 10% chance of a drop, I'd be absolutely fine with that. Because that way, you're not paying for stats, you're not paying for skill, you're not paying for advantage, you're paying purely for cosmetic. You are paying for your own ego, hey, I got that. I think RNG should be implemented into games into ways that do not affect gameplay, but do affect your personal satisfaction with the game.
I'd even add to that where you said, if you open a box and what's in there can either make or break your character and make you exceptionally good or exceptionally bad, I would say something else. And this is something that's even hit harder home, having recently been playing the Division 2, is if the amount of effort you have to put in to even get to the box, if what comes out of the box is just pure disappointment, and not because it wasn't the item you wanted, but because no matter what item comes out of there, it's going to be fucking garbage because of the loot system is not designed correctly.
Yep.
That's even worse, because that'll get people to quit a game so fast when nothing that you can even possibly get is worth the amount of effort you've had to put in to get there. Is in my opinion, I don't know how companies still get away with doing it, or even think how they can miss that in testing and things like that, where there's nothing you could, even if you got a max rolled item from this box, like every stat rolled max, because in Division 2 all the items, all the stats are random too. Which stats are on there are random, how high they roll is random. It's brutal. So like, let's say you get exactly what you want, max rolls of all the stats you want. It's still not good enough to make you really powerful in the game, because the enemies are so overtuned. Because just the general design of the gear and the general design of what you're up against is unfair.
Well, it just sounds like a general balancing problem.
It's definitely a balancing problem, but look at the levels of RNG there. So I think in that game there's 12, maybe 15 different brand sets, right, in that game. And so let's say you want a certain brand set. To complete the brand set, you need 3 pieces. It can be 3 of 6. So there's a helmet slot, gloves, boots, backpack, and a chest piece, right? And knee pads. So you're going, okay, there's 6. I only need 3. 3 of those slots filled with this brand set. So when you kill boss, you're like, okay, he's got to drop the mask of this brand set. So let's say that happens. But then that mask on that brand set has to roll these 3 different stats. And those 3 stats are completely random. Then it has to roll those 3 stats and also roll at least 2 of them to maximum. That's so much RNG stacked. And shit like this has been happening in games like World of Warcraft, where it's even a bigger problem because you're locked out of doing that content for a week at a time. If you get a piece of gear and it's just trash, you can't try to get that gear again. I mean, at least in Division, you can farm that same thing as many times as you want. But in World of Warcraft, you can't. If you don't get the drops, you're out for the week. And the same is true, for Final Fantasy 14, but at least Final Fantasy 14 has that, the protection where if you do it for 6 weeks in a row, you're going to have enough items to just buy the piece that you want. But WoW doesn't have that protection. You could play WoW and raid every single raid night with your team, clear every piece of content in the game every week, and for a whole expansion, never get the piece you want. That's a very likely possibility.
In general, the reason why these developers introduce RNG in the first place is a time gating mechanic.
Oh, for sure, it's extending content.
Right. What I don't like about it is that like you could put a different time. If you wanted someone to be able to finish something in a certain amount of time, there's a lot of things you could do to keep people from finishing it too quickly. You can make it difficult, or you can just increase the amount of times they have to beat it. Right. You don't actually ever need to have a random number.
Or have enough bosses, have enough things to do that it takes you. Like, even if you have a weekly reset, right? Even if they still stuck with this weekly, everything resets, all these raids, dungeons reset. If they had enough stuff for you to do in a 7-day period, where by the time it resets, you're barely finishing all those things, that would be better too.
Well, I think that games generally tend to. I know, like Final Fantasy 14 does, but a lot of people don't do those other things.
That's because the other things are meta. They're not.
So there's crafting. You can do hunts. Right. You can do fates.
I'm talking specifically. All right, I'm talking specifically end game stuff. So one big problem a lot of these companies run into too, with every major MMO, Final Fantasy 14 included, is the second new content comes out, old content's irrelevant. Old content doesn't matter anymore because what you get out of it is garbage, essentially, compared to what you can get what's now released.
But that's a people problem. That's not a developer problem, in my opinion.
Well, what I'm saying is it's become a developer problem, because if you look at like Burning Crusade, right? World of Warcraft Burning Crusade, it wouldn't matter in that game if you started the day the expansion launched, or if you started playing 3 weeks before that expansion ended. If you got into the game and you said, okay, I finally hit level cap, I want to raid with my group, right, with my guild. They're in the last raid of the game, the hardest raid that's currently out. You couldn't just go in there, not even to get carried. The content was too difficult. What they would do is, okay, you got to do 10-man, what's the name of that damn raid? Karazhan. If you do 10-man Karazhan, then you could do 25-man Serpent Shrine Cavern and Tempest Keep, and then you'd slowly work your way through all the raids. And you could get through those raids faster now because you'd have a whole guild helping you out, and they're all geared for it. And you'd get through it every week with minimal problems, but you still had to go through the same experience. You still had to go through the same experience as the people that did when the content was current, because the new content didn't invalidate the old. You still had to climb the ladder like everybody else. Nowadays, with all the catch-up mechanics and RNG layered into everything, and they're like, okay, developers kind of shoot themselves in the foot when they say, here's this new raid that just came out right now. By the way, the raid that was last patch, you never have to fucking do it again. In order to get the best stuff, you don't have to do it. You can just, for all intents and purposes, it cannot exist. You don't have to care.
Well, it comes down to the collection mindset again, though, too. So, like, if the same thing that is driving you is this collection mindset, then you're missing out on the lower level things, and so you're constantly stuck in the now. So it just depends on where you want to put your energy, and I think that's why I say it's a people problem, right? The developers are making this content and people aren't playing it. That's not, I don't think that's the developer's problem. They've already that'd be like creating the Mona Lisa, and then the next painting that Leonardo da Vinci made, no one looks at the Mona Lisa anymore because it's shit, because there's this new painting by Leonardo da Vinci, right? It's bullshit, right?
Like,
no,
I totally get what you're saying, and you're right. It is a people problem, and the people then turn to developers and go, "Hey, fix this."
Exactly.
And my opinion
that's
is,
where I think they're wrong.
My opinion is I think that developers could. I mean, what if they go, okay, all the old raid sets, like from WoW, right? So because WoW's in like tier 20 now, I think, in their gear sets. It's so outrageous. Oh, wait, they don't do gear sets anymore because that takes too much work. But they used to do gear sets, right? And these gear sets would, depending on what class you were, would give you huge bonuses, like that changed the way your character played. And the route Blizzard went was they literally, on those old sets, sure, you can still go grab those sets to get them for their appearance, right, if you want to. Right. But they disabled all the effects on the sets. I think what would have been much better is if those old raids stayed as hard as they are when they were released all the time, that the bosses scale to the players that come in, and the gear sets stayed relevant. That way, if someone goes, hey, this boss we're fighting right now in the current raid, the latest patch, would be so much easier if our tanks had the gear set from 3 tiers ago. Let's go back and do that and give them those sets, because those bonuses would be really effective against the moves this boss is doing.
You know, a game that did that really well, annoyingly, was Neverwinter.
See, I never played it. I looked at it, but I never played it.
Amazing. It had the best way of dealing with RNG and the best sets. I think what we're kind of getting onto now is like feature creep, power creep, and sets like that.
Yeah, we kind of went off the RNG boat a little bit.
Yeah, but Neverwinter did that brilliantly. To talk, I'd like to put about two things about RNG, if you guys would be willing to listen to that.
Oh, absolutely.
Give me your opinions, because you guys, because I haven't played too much Final Fantasy XIV, I kind of want to know how they do it. One thing I think you should never have is RNG on top of RNG. Now, I've got 2 dice here. Let's say if I roll the dice, eventually I'm going to roll a 6. Every time I roll a 6 on this dice, I'll roll the other dice, and if I get a 6, then you get a drop. You might think, oh, that's easy, it's just getting 2 6s. But it's actually a 1 in 36 chance. And the more dice you add to this, it grows exponentially. It gets even harder. So when they say, first you've got to get the drop, then you've got to get the stats, then you've got to Titan Forge, then you've got to Titan Forge more, the more steps of RNG you include, the astronomical odds. It's ridiculous. It becomes a massive
It's
number.
multiplicative, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the second one that we could look at, I want you guys to know how this does this. In old school RuneScape, every single skill, you gain experience as you do it. Anytime you gain experience in a skill, you have a tiny, tiny, tiny chance, I think it's 1 in like 70,000, to gain a pet for that skill. Now, the pet does nothing. They have no effects. All they do is follow you around. If you're fishing, you can fish for 5 years, never see one. You can fish for 10 minutes, suddenly you've got a heron flying behind you. They are done for pure vanity. And people run for them and people try and find them. But I don't like that. It's odd that no one minds that system. Everyone likes it because the RNG has no effect on the gameplay. stuff.
Oh, I see.
But you were talking about end game stuff, end game what you need. And what Remages was saying about how it's a people problem, it absolutely is. But the people have no reason to go and play the old stuff beyond personal enjoyment. It won't give an item that's good enough anymore. It won't give anything that's going to do something for you. So at what point does RNG become totally fine if it has no effect on the gameplay? And at what point should RNG be nullified and replaced with guaranteed rewards?
Well, I think the big word there was enjoyment, right? Why are you logging in the first place? Are you logging in to beat your head against the wall and get angry and, you know,
hey man, that's why I don't play 14 right now. You saw me in Party Finder every Thursday night.
Hey, I'm feeling it right now.
Drunk off my ass playing with people.
But if that's the reason you're logging in, and you have an addiction at that point, right? You're doing something you don't want to do, and you're hating yourself doing it, but you're doing it anyways. Yeah. Like that's well beyond, you're in addiction territory.
Like raise your hand if you've ever had a moment where you played a game and something happens to you, whether it's RNG or just something in the game happens, and you literally out loud say, why the fuck am I playing this? You literally.
My hand is, I know you can't see me, but my hand is raised.
It happened to me like 3 nights ago. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing with my life?
What the fuck am I doing with my life? Exactly.
I'm not enjoying myself at all. Why am I here?
Now, sometimes like that is kind of what you have the rush for, right? So, like for example, I'm trying to tackle E6S right now, which is Eden's Verse, Savage. It's the 6th turn in it, or whatever. So it's really difficult. Sometimes I mess up, sometimes I don't. And when
which one is that? That's Ifrit, right?
Yeah, that's Ifrit and Garuda.
Garuda,
and so I get I get really angry, but but it's a frustration, but it's the same frustration as I would get, say, lifting, right? If I'm going to try to lift a weight that like it's a new personal record and I don't get it, like I'm frustrated with myself, but it's a good sort of frustration. It's like,
right. I think the best frustration ever, the best that's a good point. The best frustration you can have is at yourself. That's the best frustration you can have. When the frustration is the game because the game is being unfair to you.
Exactly.
That's when you're like, that's when it's a developer problem. If it's a player problem, like it's your skill is not up to snuff, right? You're just not playing very well, or you're making bad decisions, or you're not paying attention to mechanics, and you get frustrated. That's not the developer's fault. That's your fault. And the same applies if you're with a group of people that are playing poorly and are holding you back. You're the one choosing to play with those people. Exactly. You don't have to stay there. So that is your fault. But when a game is unfair, a good example like Division 2, you're sitting there in cover, you're being careful, you're playing the game how the developers say the game is designed. Boom, out of nowhere, you're one shot, you're dead, you're deleted. And you're like, what happened? Where did that come from? I had no warning. There's literally no way I could have survived what just happened. No human being has a reaction time that fast, right? And so when you start getting frustrated because of those types of things, or let's say you played a piece of content 400 times and the thing you want doesn't drop because of RNG, and there is no system like Final Fantasy XIV has where you can eventually just buy the piece, that frustration isn't your fault. Because you're literally getting screwed by the odds over and over and over and over again.
To explain RNG and the reason we hate it so much to people who might not understand it as much, Remages, you used the whole lifting example, which is great. Yeah. Going to the gym is fantastic. I've got weights down by the side of me right now. When you go to the gym, you can track every single number involved. If you're tracking calories, you know how much calories are in all the food you're eating. You know the weight you're lifting. You know what you're doing. You've got the numbers laid out in front of you. If I eat a sandwich that I've prepared and I know it's 300 calories and suddenly it calorie forges into 700, I'm going to be kind of annoyed. I didn't plan that. And if I go to the gym and I'm bench pressing and I look to the right of me and there's this skinny guy pressing and suddenly his chest just goes boom and his biceps budge up and his shoulders are out and he's like, oh, I'm muscle forged. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? Why am I training hard and tracking the numbers if I can just get lucky and instantly surpass where I am? That's why RNG sucks. We have no control over it.
Except for, it's a good thing. I'm glad you brought up control because back in Ultima Online, there was a group of players that cracked how the RNG on skill ups worked. And it was on a timer. So what they would do is they would literally set their watches and timers for when that point reset. Because normally how the game is designed is that you swing a sword enough times, you skill up. Your skill and sword goes up, right? And they were under the belief that this is just random. You could swing your sword 10 times and gain 2 points. You could swing it 100 times and gain 1. But that's not how the system worked at all. It was all on a timer. So there was a window in which you could gain a point. And so what they would do is they would set their timers, their watches. It would beat. They'd log in the game, swing their sword once, bam, they got a point. They log out, reset their clocks. And they literally were doing that until the developers like, oh shit, they cracked it, they figured it out, we got to fix it. And it's they had to go in and redesign the skill up point system,
which proves it wasn't random. It was within a certain time frame.
It was within a certain time frame. And it just boggles my mind that, you know, RNG can fuck you so hard. Like in your example, Josh, like, and this is what the point I try to get across in a lot of different topics in MMOs, and you touched it perfectly there with your, you know, your metaphor with the guy lifting weights or eating a sandwich and
calorie foraging.
Right, calorie foraging. But like, yeah, like if you're like, I want to get into good shape because I just want to be strong. I want to be stronger. I want to be fit. I want to be healthy. So you're eating clean. You're going to the gym every day. You're putting the hard work in, right? And then it would demotivate the hell out of you if, like you said, if this fat guy comes in, right? Never, like, he's in a wheelchair. He's so lazy, right? He's one of those. He's one of those Walmart.
He's missing a foot.
He's one of those obese Walmart people that rides in the disabled carts, but they're disabled because
he's got one of those oxygen masks.
But he's disabled because of his own choices, not because of his genetics or an accident.
Exactly.
So he comes in and he sits on the thing next to you, does like 3 curls, and then bam, he's jacked like Schwarzenegger in the 80s. And that would instantly make you go, I'm not fucking doing this anymore. This is a waste of time. Like sure, I might get lucky like that, but I haven't yet. And I've been doing this for 3 years, and he's been doing it for 3 seconds. And he already accomplished what I've been trying to accomplish. And that's where RNG can really, really be unfair in MMOs. Like I said in the earlier example, if you do the hardest content in the game and you get a sword, it should be impossible for someone to get the same or better from content that's not the same or harder. Like that's just how it should be. You shouldn't be able to get lucky and get something that's better than the things that are in the loot pool for being the most skilled player. Not necessarily the best geared player, but the most skilled player. If RNG can make the worst player in the game better than the most skilled player in the game, that's when it's a problem.
I think
we talked about it earlier. Sorry, Ramesh, you carry on.
Oh, I was going to say, to jump off your point, Josh, I think where RNG is okay is when there's parameters put on it, right?
Sure.
So, like, for example, like if you're watching a football game, whether it's soccer over in the UK or if it's American football over here, like those are all people.
There are no sports right now, man.
right now, but they're all competing at the highest level, and there are certain instances where there are so many variables where it seems like they just missed the chance of the draw or something like that. So like, for example, you know, a receiver might go out to catch a football and he might be reaching the longest he could and he just barely touches the ball with his middle finger and flicks it towards him and he's able to catch it and then he goes in the end zone and gets a touchdown. Any other time, he might, like if he didn't touch the ball with his middle finger and just barely missed it, it would have been an incomplete and they would have lost the game, right? Like you could say that that's random. That's a random number generated sort of fate sort of situation that a lot of people like to watch and a lot of people like to see happen. Like they want to see that magic happen.
True, but his odds of catching that ball have gone up dramatically because of his physical training.
Because of what he's done. So that's where it's okay. The random number generator is okay. Is it's like if you're at the very edge and it's the difference between the 99.999% and the 99.998%, right? Like that's where I think RNG should be represented in video games. So like if it's the difference between like one stat point right? Like
Right.
it makes no real difference in the game whatsoever, then I'm kind of okay with that. It's not that big of a
See,
deal.
on
If
your
you were to
sports
randomly
analogy,
generate that,
back to what Josh was saying.
But anything that's like huge, where if it's like a difference between whether you're actually more powerful or not,
Right.
then I don't.
I mean, that's I mean, Josh and I both touched on where it's like it should never trump RNG should never trump skill. I mean, the most sports games like football, you just brought up American football, and I don't know if they do this in European football, but at the very beginning of the game, before anything's done, they get a coin and flip to see who goes first, who has the ball first, right? If whoever got the ball first won statistically 85, 95% of the time, they just wouldn't play. They'd be like, oh, we lost the coin toss. Fuck this. I'm done. We forfeit the game. But the coin toss has very little, if any, effect on who's going to win the game, correct? So like, that's fine. That RNG is fine. Mm-hmm. But RNG in terms of like I said, you shouldn't be able to get an item in the game doing basically nothing and have it be the same quality or even better quality based sheerly on luck than someone's item that they got from being very skilled and doing the hardest fight in the game and beating it.
To go off that, there's two interesting things that have happened recently. One of them is there's a RuneScape player called MooksWoX, WOOX, and MooksWoX is famous for soloing bosses that absolutely should not be soloable. Mechanics that will wipe out teams in one go, and MooksWoX will go, oh, actually, if you click tick perfectly here and you equip this, and eat at this moment and do this at this millisecond, you'll win. And he has done it. MooksWoX was on stream a few days ago with Google's random number generator in the background, and he typed in generate a number between 1 and 512, which is an interesting number in computing because it's a certain amount of kilobytes.
It's bit rates.
And he predicted the next 10 numbers it would generate accurately. He said, I'm going to click random generate 10 times, I'm going to get this, and this. And he was right every single time, which proves that even a random number generator has a pattern behind it to appear to be random. Right. And you said earlier about how they cracked the time thing. And one of the biggest problems with random number generators, because they are designed by computers, is as soon as you crack them, whoever's cracked them has a massive advantage.
Like card counting in a casino.
Yep.
Yeah, and Star Wars did it. Star Wars The Old Republic, one of the first original kind of Star Wars online games, it might have been The Old Republic, I think it was Star Wars Galaxies. A few users became force sensitive. You're talking like a 1%.
I remember that. I remember that mechanic. I never played the game, but I remembered that mechanic. Yeah.
I remember hearing about it.
But then, due to data mining, they suddenly discovered that actually it wasn't random who could be this. You just had to do very specific steps based on your very specific account. And as soon as the random algorithm was cracked, everyone became force sensitive. So random is a problem,
which ruined the game.
Random is not random.
Right.
Random is crackable.
Well,
as soon as it's cracked,
the same thing was with the original Asheron's Call spell system, where they designed it where you had to discover formulas by trial and error to discover a new spell. And the fewer people on your server that knew the spell, the stronger the spell would be. And people were like, this is amazing. And it was amazing. It was very innovative. But then someone cracked it, how it works, made a plugin, made an add-on, and then literally someone could click a button. Hey, for your specific character, here's the combo for every spell in the game and how to make it. So everyone did it. And
all the spells
sucked now. And so Turbine had to go in and go, okay, we're just going to put all the spells. Like there was level spells like fire 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But they go, okay, we're just going to give every spell a baseline because this system's broken now.
Yeah.
Because
I like that idea because it's
figured it out.
It's taking magic and sort of making it like an occult knowledge thing.
Right. Like there's like ley lines that are tapped into and shit.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty neat.
It was Asheron's Call had some of the most innovative ideas of any MMO ever, and haven't been repeated. And I'm shocked. I'm shocked that people haven't taken it and been like, dude, these guys were fucking geniuses. Like the fact that you could take. I know this is way off topic, but the fact that you could, all the experience you got in the game, you could take those experience points and apply them to your skills, which would level them up. And even if you hit level cap, you still gained experience and could do that. You could level up your skills until they were 999, which nobody ever reached, because that would be trillions and trillions of XP. But they would do that, and your level was just a how much experience have you earned indicator, not any indicator of how powerful you are. Because you could be level 100 and all your skills be in cooking and all kinds of shit that have nothing to do with combat, but you'd still be level like 100 because that's how much experience you've gotten at that point. It was quite innovative.
Could we take RNG and control it? This is an interesting one because I'm going to use the example of old school RuneScape again. Every single time you kill an enemy, there's a very small chance you will access something called the rare drop table. The rare drop table is a huge amount of stuff that could potentially drop. It's not game breaking, it's just quite valuable. It'd be like giving you, a few thousand coins to a few 100,000 coins, depending on how lucky you are. It's not going to beat anything, it's just nice. But when you hit the rare drop table, there's a huge amount of slots on it that are blank. And if you hit the rare drop table and get a blank slot, you get nothing. It doesn't even tell you you've hit it. It just gives you nothing. But there's an item in the game called the Ring of Wealth. And if you wear the Ring of Wealth, you're sacrificing your ring slot because you can only wear one ring at a time. And what the Ring of Wealth does is it removes some of those blank slots. So if you do hit the rare drop table, you are more likely to actually see something from it drop. People know all the numbers behind it. They've been totally honest and outward with all the numbers. They know exactly how it works and they know the chances. Now, when you mentioned the spell system earlier, players did not know the chances and so they had to figure it out. And when they figured it out,
dopamine hit too, though. They got dopamine hit when they discovered something. Exactly. I did. I remember when I learned Fire 3 the first time and I was like, I almost pissed my pants, man. I was like, this is awesome.
So instead of giving them a thing they can figure out, why don't you give them a thing where all the numbers are totally there and you say, look, this is your base chance. If you want to improve it, do this,
so you see the rules of the game up front.
Yeah.
See, and that's a great way to do it.
I prefer that. Yeah.
And then the opposite direction, which is what Assurance Call did, was just quantity. So it was like, okay, so you want really good armor, really good, you want shards. You want these kinds of things. What you would do is you would get strong enough, get a group together, and you'd find the locations in the world where these singularity caches would spawn, which were like rare chests, but there were certain locations and weather conditions where they would spawn regularly. And then the enemies that had the highest had that loot table. And so you would get your group together and you would just camp and you'd have a great time talking to your friends, shit talking, but you'd be fighting all these monsters. And so the RNG in itself, like the chance that you'd get a great item from one enemy wasn't very good, but you killed in a 1 hour in Assurance Call, we called it a buff session because all buffs lasted about an hour. So a buff session, an hour of playtime, you would kill 100, 150 of these monsters. And in that time, because you killed so many and you looted so many of these chests, it was almost unheard of that no one got at least one thing in that hour they wanted to take back because it was valuable. So they went the quantity approach where, you're increasing your odds artificially by just being able to do this so many times. And seeing in modern games like theme park games, especially now, theme park MMOs, you can't do that because all the stuff that drops the best stuff, has the best loot tables, is on a weekly lockout. You can do it one time and then get the fuck out.
One of the reasons we're so annoyed by RNG is when we see someone, and this goes to the gym example earlier, when we see someone achieve something difficult or achieve something fantastic, we are not annoyed at them getting it. We're annoyed at the amount of time they've saved, knowing that it's going to take us a hell of a long time. So what about items that increase your chance of a drop? In Diablo, you get Magic Find. If you want to stack Magic Find,
used to. They took that out of the game.
So we wouldn't dislike RNG as much if we could actively manipulate it.
You could have some kind of control. Right.
Yeah, I think one of the worst examples of RNG is like notorious monster drops, right? So one, the notorious monster itself is random.
You're talking about the hunts? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, not hunts
like
in
Ixion?
14. No, not necessarily. More like 11, right? So 11.
I don't remember 11 well enough. The last thing I remember from 11 is my eyes were bleeding because I was so mad from de-leveling 4 times in a night.
Final Fantasy 11 would have a system where you would kill a bunch of normal mobs, and then out of those normal mobs,
that's
maybe a notorious monster.
Eureka did that,
right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right, and then when you kill the notorious monster, which that you were trying to hunt that monster because that monster dropped something, right? So then it would be random that monster would drop the thing after you defeated it. So not only did you have to
So that's RNG stacked on RNG.
It's RNG stacked on RNG.
there.
Exactly.
Right.
Once you start having too many layers of RNG, I really start hating it.
There should never be more than one layer.
I agree. Yeah.
In my opinion.
But again, as long as the RNG is, sequestered to a very minimal standard, then it's not my problem. So like, for example, like for things like Notorious Monsters, I didn't even bother hunting them. Like, yeah, cool. That's great that there's a chance that I could drop, but I could be spending that time literally leveling solo and just, working the system and working out the money where I would out level the drop that it got anyways.
Right.
So
one layer of RNG, yeah, I agree, is perfectly fine. Like I look back on my vanilla World of Warcraft days, Assurance Call days, where you're farming dungeons to get gear. World of Warcraft, the original, Burning Crusade, and Wrath of the Lich King, especially because you had your best in slot list, and you're like, okay, this boss drops this boss drops that, and I want that. If I ran the dungeon 5-6 times that night and didn't get the item, I was okay. I was like, I'm gonna get it eventually. That boss is gonna drop it eventually, right? Because there's only one layer of RNG I have to get through. That boss is always gonna be there when I go to that dungeon, and he's always gonna have that loot table. So there's one level of RNG. That's it. However, and even if I have one level of RNG in a raid, and let's say my friend's in the raid with me, right? We both want this item, and it drops and he wins. I'm not as pissed because I'm like, yeah, he's worked just as hard as me. He's been here at these raids over and over, and he won. That's fine. It'll drop again. Yep. It doesn't bother me too much. I mean, you've seen me when I'd stream and I wouldn't get an item, and I'd just be like, oh, that sucks. That's bullshit. Oh, well, I'll do it next time. Not a big deal. Now, when you get pissed is how World of Warcraft, for example, took away Master Loot. It's no longer in the game. So now what they do is everyone's on a personal loot, which is even more of a pull the slot machine. You're lucky, right? And so like if you win a piece of gear off a boss now, the next boss may not even give you anything because your chances are now rock bottom again because you just won something last fight, right? Yeah, that's a problem is what if the item it gave you on the last boss is not an item you even wanted or cared? If it would have just dropped off the boss, you wouldn't have rolled for it. You didn't want it. You didn't care. And now that fucked your chances because you just got it. And you're like, oh, I don't even want this. And then you see your buddy get the item you wanted off that boss and he doesn't want it. And you're like,
and it's bind on equip
and you're like, what the fuck, dude? And
you can't even give it to you.
All the control is removed from the player's hands at that point. Yeah. That's so many layers of RNG. It makes my head spin. Josh, I saw you writing down notes.
Super strange that Ramey just mentioned it earlier, and so far we seem to have two very different systems. We have the system where you can do what's guaranteed. You can go and solo level and get known variables, or you can risk the system where you can potentially get something very rare and trust in RNGesus. Very few games do it where the RNG is included within the guaranteed money. So you go and level in a way that you know you're going to achieve. You go and kill a boss that you know is going to drop something. And then every now and again, 1 out of 100, 1 out of 1,000 times, you've got this extra cool thing that doesn't massively break the game, but is nice to have. It's so strange that it seems to be you either do what's guaranteed and stable, or what's not guaranteed and potentially incredible. It seems to be two very different unbalanced sides. No RNG is a guaranteed endpoint, but will never be as good as the random number generator with no guaranteed endpoint.
Well, it's just like in real life with a job. You have a job, you have a guaranteed salary. You go to a casino, you have a very small chance you're a millionaire in an hour.
All right. Exactly. And people always say, go and do it. I mean, Bo Burnham is one of my favourite comedians. And Bo Burnham, someone once asked to him, Bo Burnham, what advice would you give people? And he said, do not do what I did. I got extremely lucky. Yeah. He says that a celebrity telling people to do what they did is kind of like a lottery winner telling people to go and buy lottery
Brad Pitt said the same thing. Yeah. He's like, I just got really lucky.
Don't go and buy lottery
man.
tickets. The chance you're winning is tiny.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so now that we're talking about gambling and pure luck when it pertains to RNG, how do you think, especially these days, because I've noticed as time has gone on, and I don't know if they just kept it hidden for a long time or if it's something new that's developed, but companies have gotten scummier and scummier and more underhanded. And so I'm just wondering, how do you see developers using RNG as a way to take advantage of their player base?
Well, I think what the main thing is that gambling is part of the gaming industry.
Well, and it's addicting too. It's a drug.
Yeah. Yeah. So like when people say that I'm in the gaming industry, like us as video gamers think, oh, you work for Bethesda or you work for one of these big game companies or AAA game companies or you make your own games. Like, no, you could work in Vegas. That's gaming, right? Like, and there's a lot of money. There's always been a lot of money in gaming.
Right.
But what I want to touch on earlier is what I want to ask you guys is like you guys were talking about itemization and how people could get better items than you. There is a degree of randomization and sort of lottery winning, like you just talked about with Bo Burnham and Brad Pitt. I don't find myself angry at those guys though. I think there are people that are, they're angry of their success because they either rolled lucky or you were born into the right family or something. Like I don't. For me personally, I don't have any anger at those. Like I actually feel it's like, oh, cool, good for them.
Right. Well, to clarify with what you're saying, when that happens, these examples Josh and I talked about happens, I'm not mad at that player for being lucky. Like I don't like, oh, fuck you. I hope you and your family die. Like no, nothing like that. I'm mad that the game enabled that to happen in the first place.
What about when life
I'm mad at the game? Well, I'm mad at life all the time too when it happens. I was pretty pissed at life when I got cancer. I was pretty pissed off at life. I wasn't pissed off at anybody else. Specifically, it wasn't one person's fault. In fact, it was kind of my fault for how I treated my body.
Were you pissed off at Bill Gates for becoming a billionaire?
No, not at all. Because he put in the work. He
put in the work, but I mean, there are a lot of people that put in the same amount of work as he does and didn't get quite to the area that he did. Right? Well,
sure, but at the same time, I think it's more okay. Like if I beat 20 bosses in a game, didn't get the item I wanted, and my friend beat the boss in the game 20 times, and he also didn't get it. Right, we both got screwed by RNG in that situation. I'd be like, yeah, and then let's say the 21st time I still don't get it, and the 21st time he does, he finally gets it. Yeah, I'm gonna be like a little jealous, but at the same time, I'm gonna say, "Good job, man! You got it, you won." But like, if I do it the 21st time and don't get it, and then the guy who is his first time in the raid, and he AFKs the whole fight and stands back there and doesn't do anything, right? Dies every 15 seconds, and then he gets it. I'm gonna be a little pissed. Not even necessarily at him, but like, dude, this is bullshit. This is not. And it's even worse if someone did something that wasn't even hard. Like someone logs in and it's just, here's your daily reward, and it's better than anything I have that I worked my ass off for.
Mm-hmm. If I can add in a strange point of view from this related to acting, you mentioned, Ramageus, would you be pissed at these people for succeeding? Of course not. You should never find joy or sadness in other people's failures or successes. It doesn't matter what they do, but the way that acting works, and I'm going to link this back to RNG in a second, Brad Pitt did remarkably well. There's a thing in England, if you want to be a successful actor, the biggest advantage you can possibly have is being rich. That is the single biggest advantage you can have. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how good you are, or how talented you are, or how skilled you are, or how hard you work. If you can afford to live in London or Los Angeles and go to auditions every day and not need to work and go to wine and dine the biggest agents, chances are you're going to succeed. It's a much higher chance. Anyone could do it. Let's say there's a chance that everyone's got a 1 in 7 billion chance of becoming a famous actor. That's fine. My chance is the same as anyone else's. It's what I'm trying to do. It's what they're trying to do. Then we start to look at the items like the Ring of Wealth. We start to look at the RNG manipulating items. But in real life, that's location. I live in England. I don't live in sub-Saharan Africa. I don't live in Los Angeles. The fact that I'm based here will affect that. So the RNG of me becoming a famous actor is actually affected by circumstances beyond my control. Mm-hmm. If I could control them, I could have better RNG at success. Video games are one place where we all want to feel that we're treated fairly. And if we don't feel treated fairly, then we're going to become very, very unhappy. I'm not unhappy that anyone has become a famous actor. I am annoyed that they say I worked really hard, and I'm thinking, I'm sure you did, but it probably helped that your parents were millionaires. Yeah. It probably helped that your uncle was, Francis Ford Coppola. It probably helped that your dad was, Dwayne Johnson. I don't think Will Smith's son is a good actor. I think he was in films
he's
because
dog
he's
shit.
Will Smith's son.
Yeah.
So the fact that we're talking about RNG, Will Smith's son had exactly the same chance as being an actor that I did. The difference was his chance was heavily manipulated by factors outside of his and my control. RNG pisses us off not because other people succeed at it, but because there seem to be factors beyond our control that we cannot change.
So like when people get something that it doesn't look like, so like Will Smith's son, for example, like you can see it's like, nah, you're not, like the acting isn't there, but you're getting these chances that other good actors could have.
He probably worked very hard. He probably worked just as hard as every other struggling actor, but he was always going to get that.
But you got to keep in mind too that then it can work against you, because Brad Pitt, he may have been really successful because the RNG weighed in his favor, but then he went and married Angelina Jolie, and now his life is fucking trash. So it's like, you can make bad decisions based off your RNG, man.
Yeah.
So talking about that, that's their random chance was different to our random chance because it's never random. It's factors that we can affect, factors we can control. So RNG within games is always affected by certain factors.
Right.
And we need to find those factors and know what they are and be able to control them.
And so where us being upset or annoyed or agitated comes from is because we understand that the world we live in, real life, isn't fair. We're like you said, you're Romagus, you can be born into a rich family, have connections right out of the gate. You can be born poor in a gutter, right? By a prostitute that abandons you. Like you just totally ends at the extreme. Yeah. But when we enter an MMO, we're under the understanding, especially because that's what's touted to us by most developers, that we're all on equal playing fields. And it should be that what we do, if any manipulation of the numbers of how successful we are, should come from us. It should come from what we do to manipulate our chances to be better, which should give us an advantage over people that don't do those things. Now, when we get frustrated, when we get frustrated is when guy named, Death Lord Big Nuts McGee jumping up and down next to us takes nothing seriously, doesn't work hard at all, and the game just goes, "You're lucky. Here's something better than this guy who spends 8 hours a day doing the hardest content in the game. You just get it because luck." Well, so even that doesn't happen.
As long as your work is trackable and you can gain progress, is that a sufficient sort of
because you can't RNG trackable progress. You can RNG rewards.
So, for example, in life, there are people that are born into rich families, and that's completely random. And then there's people who are born with degenerative diseases, which is also random, but in the opposite direction, right?
Right.
Now, both of those people can use the means available to them. It would suck if we lived in a society where the person with the degenerative disease couldn't do anything with his life.
Right.
And sometimes that does that, depending on the disease. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, I'm not always so upset with the reward aspect of things, because as long as there's a system in place in which I can put my mind and effort into and be okay at the end of the day, I'm all right with that. But if survival becomes random, right, that's not a part of a system I want to be a part of.
You shouldn't play Oregon Trail then, man.
Right, exactly.
Don't play that game. You're gonna rage, dude.
Not a fan of it.
Yeah, and people say, like, you can be born wealthy, you can be born poor, and you can both work equally as hard and have different results. And when someone says, "Oh, I worked hard, I achieved this," we feel okay. We as human beings say, "All right, you earned that, you got that, you deserve what you have." It annoys us when someone says, "Oh, I got lucky. I got lucky, I got this." How have you got what you've got? "Oh, I got lucky." Well, that doesn't seem fair because there's no way to be lucky. There's no way to manipulate it. That's the big problem.
The same reason we get frustrated with people that get everything good and are bad people.
Yeah. I'm not frustrated at the person himself. The person did nothing wrong.
Right.
I'm frustrated at the the system that enables that. Now, we all know real life enables that, absolutely. We three are infinitely more lucky than many people in the world will ever be.
Right.
And we are not as lucky as the multi-billionaires above us.
Which is a very small percent.
We will never be at their level. We will never
right.
understand. But when we play a video game, there is that understanding that my character's life is dictated by my actions. My avatar in the game will succeed or fail based on what I choose to do. But if my avatar can succeed or fail to absurd degrees based on luck that the game bestows upon them, the game is effectively ripping agency away from me every now and again and saying, hey, you're either going to be ridiculously powerful or very wealthy or extremely poor. If I'm playing the game and I kill a boss and every now and again I get a drop worth hundreds of millions or potentially billions of coins, I am going to be infinitely more lucky, richer and more powerful than people below me. There's a drop in RuneScape that's worth about £2,000 in real life if you get it. It's incredibly rare to find. What would happen if the opposite was true? What if I was just walking through RuneScape and suddenly my character just dropped dead and it's appeared, you've had a brain aneurysm?
And it deleted your account.
I didn't do that.
Right.
I feel that everything that happens to my character in any game should be entirely within my control. And if a random number generation has to happen, if drops have to be rare, that's fine. I would like to know the chances so I can make an informed decision about whether it's worth doing it or not.
I agree.
No,
yeah,
I agree.
think the big
completely.
word that you used there was agency.
And that's the thing is agency gets forced upon you or ripped away from you in modern MMO RNG design. Perfect example.
How's it forced on?
It's saying it's forced on you when, like, perfect example is what I said earlier with WoW, where it forces an item on you that you wouldn't have rolled on. You wouldn't have had any interest in. And not only did you force you to take the item that you didn't want, but that also drastically fucked your chances of getting an item you do want later on. Because now you're rock bottom.
So that's taking the agency out of your...
Yeah, because you're like, if that item would have just dropped on the boss, the raid leader would have said, hey, anybody want this? And I would have said, no, thanks. Yeah. Right? You said, nah, no, thanks. But now that it's all personal, it's literally, you have to have this item you don't want, which you're just going to vendor or shard, right? And now because you won an item, the odds you'll win an item from the next boss is now dropped down to the lowest possible it can be because you just won something. And you have to not win something X amount of times before there's a good chance you'll win something again. So that's taking away your agency to even choose if you want an item or not. In the same way that the game forces luck onto someone of, hey, you stood in town and somebody else in your clan beat some random boss, so here's everyone in the guild gets a free reward. Oh, here's a reward. It's a legendary item. It's the best item in the game. Obviously, that's an extreme example, but that's forcing everybody else that worked hard to not be rewarded. Like it's just the RNG should be one layer again, where it's, hey, and like we should know the stats. This boss here has this loot table. This is the percent chance each item will drop on each kill. If one item drops this kill, it has no effect on what item is going to drop the next kill. It's just everyone has this chance every time, right? So that you can decide if it's worth your time to do it or not.
Do you think RNG is also hated so much because the difference between, or the power level, or the rarity, or the value difference between the common things and the ultra rare things is so massive? So let's say there was a sword that did 100 damage, it was a very common drop. A sword that did 101 is an uncommon, and a sword that did 105 is extremely 0.001% rare. When you get that, it's more about the elation of, oh my god, I achieved this, I got
the really rare thing. Yeah.
No longer, how powerful am I?
Right.
RNG is also a massive issue because hitting the rarest RNG is such a game-changing moment.
That's true.
That's one of the big problems. Make the RNG, keep it as rare as you want to keep it, but make it show if you achieve that ridiculously rare thing, your game doesn't drastically change.
See, and I agree, because in the past, in the older MMOs, the most powerful items in the game, so I'll give an example from a few games, the Greater Shadow Armor from Asheron's Call, right?
Yeah.
The tier sets, or hey, even better, the legendary items in the original WoW, like Sulfuras and Blessed Blade of the Windseeker, right? Thunder Fury. What's another one? Dark Age of Camelot had one. I don't remember what it was called. It was a sword though. But those really powerful game-changing items were items that you couldn't get through RNG. You could get some of the materials to make them from RNG, but you would still have to progress and build. And if you worked hard enough, you would eventually get that thing. You would eventually get it. That's okay. I'm fine with that. The most game-changing items in the game being something you work towards and will get eventually if you put forth the time. Same with like the Romagus. You'll understand this concept. The relic weapons in Final Fantasy 14. The weapons. What are they? Yeah, the weapons you get every expansion. There's a new one that works just great because you will get it if you put in the effort. Long enough. If you'll eventually get it. That's fine. And any little tiny bits of single layer of RNG, like an item you need 5 of to put into the crafting pattern, I'm fine with that because that's one level of RNG. Eventually you'll get there. Where I'm not okay with it is like what you said, Josh, where random asshole number 64 loots chest, gets item that literally lets him kill anybody one shot, like breaks the game. And he didn't do anything to get that. It just was handed to him. That's
why it's not. That's not an achievement to me.
Right,
that's why
at all.
Like someone who wins the lottery isn't an achievement.
Right.
Like that's just luck.
Right. And how much better do you feel? I'd argue you feel even better when you finally complete that legendary weapon or item because you put in 2 months, 3 months of work and you're like, I finally have it. This feels so good. You had little dopamine hits of luck when you got the crafting pieces along the way, but the biggest hit was I achieved this. I did this hard thing that not everybody has done. Then the polar opposite, you're going to be elated. Oh my God, I just got this sword from this chest that lets me basically win the game. That's going to be super exhilarating. Then you're going to do it for like an hour and then be like, okay, this is boring. I don't care about this anymore. This is whatever. Who cares? It's because there's no achievement there.
On top of that, too, there's a real life psychological situation. It happens, and they've studied lottery winners, right? A lot of lottery winners are either like 19 or they're 65. That's where the majority of lottery winners fall. Usually the lottery winners that win at 65, it's because they're already retired and they literally throw thousands upon thousands of dollars on lottery tickets and they work the numbers of the system. The kids that are young ended up just getting lucky. Right. And then what those kids that are young, like almost, and it's the same in the UK because I remember, exactly. It's the same in the UK because I remember there was an example of a girl who was like 17 or 18. She won the lottery and then she spent it all on coke. And she was in the poorhouse. She was in the poorhouse by the age of 18.
And nothing of value was lost.
Exactly. And so like, where'd all that money go to? Right. Like the money that has been collected through tax dollars in order to have a lottery that's supposed to fund schools, all of that cash prize went to coke dealers. Fucking wonderful.
Yeah.
And it's the same here in the States too.
Right. And here's the thing that's crazy is it's not uncommon for people to get some really great items in a game that are just random and are game-changing, game-breaking items. And it's not uncommon within a month or two of them getting those items, they just quit the game.
Yeah.
They're like,
right. Well, and that's another thing too. Is with these people is they don't appreciate the work that because they didn't do anything.
They have no attachment because you're right. Exactly. They did no work and they had no journey. Their journey was literally pulling a slot machine one time and getting lucky. My
brother, on the other hand, he's got this whole thing planned out. Right. When he wins the lottery, he's going to do this and he's going to do this and he's going to do this. Right. I was like, for me, like I laugh at him because it's like, you're playing a losing game in the first place, right? He's like, well, you can't win if you don't play, right? It's like, yeah, I can. I win every day. I don't play. I win $5.
The lottery is a tax on people who don't understand probability.
That's exactly. That's precisely. And that's what I told him.
It's a tax on the stupid.
I told him you raised earlier. We've so far talked about positive RNG, getting something, the chance of something good happening to us. Let's bring up the lovely Black Desert Online and talk about negative RNG. So whenever
the worst RNG I had in that game was when
I
installed it.
Yep. You have, I think the weapon systems or the armor systems goes from like 0 to level 15. And whenever you've gathered enough supplies, you can try to level up your item to the next level. If you succeed, the supplies are used up, your item goes to the next level, you go and grind the next lot of supplies. If you fail, your supplies are all used up, but your item doesn't change. If you fail really badly, not only do you use the supplies up, your item goes down again. Which means that there's now negative potential RNG. It's not only you get something, it's if you don't roll well, we take something away from you. But don't worry, because the developers sell various things. They sell something that can guarantee the success. They sell something that will save your materials if you don't get a success, and they sell something that will guarantee you don't go down. So you can work out the amount of money you want to spend into it. So to them, RNG is simply a, hey, how lucky are you feeling? Because it's not that you might win, it's now that you might lose.
Exactly. And I love that you brought that up, because we were talking earlier about when we get frustrated is when we lose control. When we lose control of manipulating our RNG.
A bit of lag on your end there, mate. Give me a sec.
Right. And one big thing here is, that's a perfect example, is for Black Desert Online, they took the ability to manipulate your RNG and they put it behind a paywall. Now, a positive way this can be done, a positive way, this is going to sound weird, a positive way negative RNG can be done, is they did it in Asheron's Call. So there was a sword you could get in the game called the Peerless Atlan Weapon, right?
It was to turn a few things off on my stream, getting a slight bit of lag going on here.
Oh, okay, you're good.
I'll sort some stuff out. It's probably just Steam trying to update.
Yeah, tell me when you're stable. Yeah, it's looking a little slideshowy over there. I mean, you look fine here.
I'll turn off what I need to turn off now. Give it a sec.
Okay.
It's just getting some lag on my side. Okay, carry on, guys.
Okay.
I think we're good now.
Okay, so how you can positively do negative RNG, instead of putting away your ability to manipulate your own RNG behind a paywall like Black Desert has done, how Asheron's Call did it is there was a sword in the game called the Peerless Atlan Sword, where you'd gather motes off golems, and then you'd make ingots. These two ingots you then combine into one huge one, and then you would hand it into a golem who would give you back a sword. He'd make a sword out of it for you, right? Now, what affected whether you got a low quality sword, a medium quality sword, or the peerless quality was how high your skill was in that stat, and you could further manipulate it. So if you're turning in a sword, you want the Peerless Atlan Sword, you're like, okay, I'm going to buff my strength. I'm going to find a mage in the city. He's going to buff my strength. He's going to buff my coordination and my sword skill to the highest I can get them. I'm going to wear all my sword plus to sword rings and armor. So you'd get that skill as high as possible, then turn it in. And then the odds you would get the Peerless at that point when it was over a certain threshold, because players figured out what threshold was like almost guaranteed to get Peerless. People figured that out. And so they go, okay, you got to get over 300. If you're over 300, the chances you're not going to get Peerless are really low. And so that's what people did. And if you failed, you had to go regrind the motes and do it again. But the item you got would still be decent. You just have to wait if you wanted to try for a Peerless again. And once people figured out what the threshold was, almost nobody didn't get a Peerless anymore, because you could self-manipulate your chances by getting your skill up, spending your experience in the right spots, and getting mage players to buff up your skills to the max for temporarily buff for an hour or whatever, and then you'd go turn it in. And what you were saying, Black Desert, is holding your ability to manipulate the RNG hostage behind your wallet so they can monetize your bad luck even further.
Yeah, that's where I just nope
monetize
out.
Your bad luck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's where I just nope out. And this is where a lot of my problem kind of has to do with the community and what they're willing to pay for.
The bullshit they're willing to put up with, because that tells the developer, you can keep doing this to us because we'll pay for it.
A really interesting point one of my viewers has just raised, 6'3". Thank you for raising this, is the Western market versus the Eastern market. because in the Eastern market, you're talking Korean MMORPGs, Terra, Blade and Soul, Black Desert Online.
Yes.
They're fine with that. They're absolutely fine, because to them, monetizing the game and monetizing RNG, or removing RNG if you want to pay for it, is an accepted part of the game. It only seems to be a major negative over in the West.
Do you think that might be, and this is just, I'm just speculating, you think that might be because most of these countries are communist regimes?
I honestly think what it is because
South Korea is
because the work ethic over in Japan and China and Korea is work as hard as you can all the time. Then anyone that plays a video game all the time instead of working is going to look lazy. So when they come home from work, they simply take their paycheck and pay to remove the RNG. To them, it's a reward in the game in order for matching a cultural norm. You work harder, you better in the game as well. But over in the West, we like to separate our game status from our work status.
Very much so. I mean, which is, it goes to show that those countries you mentioned, like Japan, I don't think it's a surprise they have the highest suicide rate in the world. Like, they're working themselves to death, and then when their play becomes their work too, you know,
they need to succeed at the play. They need to be seen to be playing the hardest.
Right.
So you spend your money on it.
Yep, exactly. And then companies monetize it. They're going to monetize. The bottom line is a company will monetize and gouge you with whatever you allow them to. If nobody spent a dime on those things, they'd go away, because it would be a waste of the developer's time and money to make those.
I've just remembered a perfect example of RNG that affected me. It's actually why I don't play a game anymore. Again, going back to RuneScape. Old school RuneScape is the 2007 version of the game that's currently playable. It's the most popular one. Back in, I want to say 2016, they released RuneScape 3. RuneScape 3 got effectively bought out by an Insight venture company called Insight Ventures. They basically wanted to monetize it. First thing they did with the game was add in this thing called Squeal of Fortune. Squeal of Fortune every time you log into the game, you spin a wheel. You have a chance of winning something. I spun the wheel. I won a weapon worth about 40 million coins. Now, I only had about 20 million coins in the game after playing for about 6 years. So that's a pretty damn good weapon. I've stuck it in my bank. I've never used it. I have no connection to it at all. I don't feel any emotional connection or anything to that weapon. Soon as I got it, I kind of thought, well, that's a bit shit. It just took all. I was saving for that weapon. I was looking forward to it. I was working. I was logging in to get it, and the game was like, "Here you go." And I'm like, "I'm going to go and play another game now." You've taken away all reason for me to bother logging in and doing anything. Your RNG of giving me stuff is now so overpowered and so boring. Why would I bother playing your game when I know that I could just log in every day, spin the wheel, and have a chance of winning? Now, your game, because of RNG, is no longer a game. It's a gambling simulator that I just do the minimum in.
Right. And a lot of games have become gambling simulators. And again, I'm going to reference Division 2 here, where you run into a similar problem when everything you can get from the RNG system is worthless. If there's nothing that's worth getting, why are you logging in? You know, you're like, okay, just to be there?
Yeah.
That gets old kind of quick. Even if the gameplay is really good, eventually you're going to go, okay, I'm done, because it's a game that's designed to not have an end. Sure, like a single-player game, Final Fantasy VII, for example, part of the rush of playing every day is I want to see what happens next. I want to get to the end. That doesn't exist in MMOs. So if there's nothing worth getting...
with you and me, we know that the very existence of RNG means if we don't get lucky, we will never be as powerful, as rich, or as in a powerful position as someone who does get it. Rome just seems to have a much healthier attitude to it, which is, it can exist, but I'm going to do my own thing and not worry about it too much.
As long as I have the option to do my own thing, right? It would be different. So like I don't play gambling games. I don't really play poker or blackjack. And when I do play poker or blackjack, it's just for fun. I don't ever bet money on it, right? And so I can kind of enjoy it for a little bit, but I'm not really much of a fan. But if the entire game is based off of randomness and there's no skill involved, I don't like it. But if there's an option for me to go do something on my own and I can derive pleasure from that, then I'm going to go do that thing. If the game requires stat rolls, and if the game requires RNG in order for me to progress, I'm just going to forego it entirely and just go a different route and do something else with my time.
Yeah. Let's go back to one of the very first RNG things, Dungeons and Dragons. I've got 3 6-sided dice here. Dungeons & Dragons 1st, 2nd, and 3rd edition all had the basic Dungeons & Dragons stats. Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. And you generate these stats by rolling 3d6, which can give you a number from 3, if you roll 3 1s, to 18, which is 3 6s. This does mean if you're generating a character and you roll 3 6s, you are going to be massively overpowered in that stat. Now, the latest edition, the 5th edition, what they've done is they've added a 4th dice, and they say roll 4 and remove the lowest. What they've done by adding this is they've removed the chance of being as crap. They haven't removed the chance of getting 18. They've actually slightly increased the chance of getting 18, because rolling 3 6s on 4 dice is more likely than rolling 3 6s on 3 dice. But it's still random within a confine. Instead of the 3 to 18, it's now 4 to 24. They've made it, it's more varied, but it's also never as low. So maybe video games could do that. I don't mind things being more varied if the chance of you getting crap is removed.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that. I mean, where my example was within Division was everything is crap no matter what. And that's down to game balance more so than anything else. But they attempted to do things like that in like World of Warcraft, for example. They'll say, yeah, but every time you don't win something, it increases the chance you will get something. But here's the silver lining: it doesn't increase the chance you'll get something good.
Yeah,
it just you'll get something. Yeah, and they call it bad luck protection.
Yeah, to hop off what Josh was mentioning, to get something good, only if you get something good, right? So, like, for example, I forgot what it was for. Well, there's a psychological condition where if you feel deprived of something good, that was worse than not even knowing it at all, right? So, for example, if you're told...
ignorance is bliss.
Exactly. Yeah. Ignorance is bliss. So like if you were given an example, like, hey, if you bend over at this time on a Tuesday, you have a chance to win $1 million. Right.
I really don't know how you're going to win $1 million by bending over on a Tuesday.
But if you never heard that and you just kind of went throughout your life not ever knowing that if you were to bend over at this time on a Tuesday, that you would get that $1 million, your life would be unaffected and you wouldn't be angry. But if you decided to bend over at that time on a Tuesday and you didn't win $1 million, you would feel this sense of loss, a sense of loss that shouldn't by all means of rationality be there, but is there. And so again, and this is why I keep referring back to it, the problem is with the people, right? If you know this, right? If you know that it was just random all along, it's not that big of a deal whether or not I bend over at 12 o'clock on a Tuesday or not, and I don't win $1 million, then that's fine. Or choose not to do it. You shouldn't let the chance of it ruin your day or ruin your experience. You have to be able to put the experience back in your control. And as long as there's methods in which you can do that, then I'm okay with it.
See, and this is where, like Josh was saying, where Josh and I are of a specific mindset and you're of a little different mindset, where, like, because if you think about it, what causes, I think RNG in MMOs is probably not the main cause, but definitely one of the top 5 reasons people quit playing a game. I mean, Josh, you mentioned yourself that's when you quit RuneScape 3. It was like, it just killed it for you. To be honest, like outside of all the, communist activities Blizzard was taking part in during the whole Liberate China thing, won't go into it. But outside of that, the biggest thing that made me quit World of Warcraft back in Legion, because this is before they were really, really have exposed themselves to being a shit company. That's what broke me ultimately, was the Titan forging and the War forging. And the fact that the legendaries they had introduced in the game were night and day difference on how efficiently and how good your character was. And it was completely random if you ever got your legendary for your class. Like, it was just random. You get it anytime, anywhere, off any boss, anything. But you could get every legendary your class except for the one you want. And it got to the point where raid guilds were literally like, hey, we're not taking you on that class unless you have that legendary. You know what I mean? Which, yeah, that's people setting those rules. Exactly. What I'm saying is still, like, it got to the point where that's a meta thing. You have to have this legendary. And then you go in and the Titan Ford and the RNG on top of RNG on top of RNG on top of RNG, it just makes you feel like shit. It literally is the same way you would feel if you went to a casino with, $500,000 and you're only spending a little of the time. You're playing smart. You're not just blowing it all on one bet, but you're going in slowly playing the tables. And over a course of a couple weeks, you're out of money. You just lost it all, and it just drains you. You're just like, dude, I'm just fucking done with this. Like, this is not fun. It's not having this much randomness affect how good my character is not fun.
Well, see, and I guess this is a lesson I learned from my stepmother, because my stepmother and my father, they go gambling almost like every weekend, but they sequester aside, they put aside a certain amount of money, and if they go over that amount, they stop. Right. They don't chase it. They don't chase the dopamine rush. Right?
Sure.
So they go with $200 every weekend, and they go spend money and when they run out of their $200, they run out. And if they double their 200 or go even more, then they call it a night or whatever. They have certain stopping points, and they have stopping points both at the top and at the bottom. Right. But there are a lot of people that so, like, with your gambling metaphor, I mean, there'd be nights where they wouldn't win anything, and they'd blow their $200 and they wouldn't win anything, but they actually liked playing the game. They liked making the bets. They liked talking to the people next to them at their poker table or at their slot machine.
Sure.
They enjoyed going to the buffet. They actually enjoyed the theme park aspect of being in Vegas,
which brings up the topic of what you're talking about is, if RNG on RNG on RNG is stacked also on top of homogenized, boring classes, uninteresting boss fights.
Correct.
That's even worse, because then you can't say, hey, well, at least the content is fun. Yeah. Because a lot of people, like you said at the beginning, Romagus, log in every day and they don't even like playing, but they're going after the addiction, the chase of the RNG win. Like, I gotta win. And they'll do that until they're burnt out. See, for me, the second a game no longer becomes fun, the second it feels like a job, I'm out. And I get to that point much faster if there's RNG on RNG on RNG on RNG and the content's not fun to boot.
Agreed.
But Josh, I see you writing down the notes.
Yeah,
man. I know you got something to say.
I've got 2 points that I want to kind of discuss super quick. Based on what Ramay just said, I've got a little keychain here of a Game Boy Color.
Oh, hell yeah.
Game Boy Color here. And Ramay just said that there exists this idea that if you don't know about something, you can't be annoyed by it. Did either of you guys play Pokemon Red or Blue? Or Pokemon Gold or Silver?
I never really got into the Pokemon games, not because I didn't think they'd be any good. My little brother played them all the time. You got to keep in mind. I'm 3 years away from 40, so Pokemon was a little after.
I'm in the same exact boat as Raziel, except for just a year younger.
So if you threw a Pokeball,
I know how Pokemon works, though. So.
Yeah. If you threw a Pokeball, you could catch a Pokemon. I was told when I was a kid, if you hold left on the D-pad and press B on the Game Boy, you got a higher chance of catching the Pokemon. Doesn't do a thing. I still do it. Doesn't do a damn thing. I know there's absolutely no effect on it, but I still do it, because if I do it and I catch the Pokemon, I attribute my success to my actions. And if I throw the ball and I don't do it and the ball fails, I attribute my failure to my actions.
You're like, I didn't press the button, man. That's my fault.
I'm taking responsibility and I want to feel like I'm affecting it.
Right.
So let's look into how we can.
That's why people blow on their dice, man.
Change it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Magic the Gathering one more time. I want a certain Magic the Gathering card. I know it's in a pack somewhere. It's in a booster pack. I could spend £4 on booster packs for the rest of my life and never get that card. Or I could spend £100 and buy the card straight from a third-party seller. The maths in my mind is this card is worth £4, but the reality is the card has the potential to be got for £4. It has the guarantee to be get for 100 or the potential to be found for 4. So is there a way that we can manipulate RNG and just buy what we want instead of get what we want? Whether it's with real money or it's with in-game money or it's with in-game time, does there need to be a way where anything that is potentially randomly generated could actually be achieved through a guaranteed
You know what,
way?
Josh, you just made some fucking 400 IQ big brain stuff come up. Okay, so here we go. I got an idea. This is a possible option of how we could fix this. So let's say a boss has a loot table of 8 items, and you specifically want 1. There's a sword he drops. You want it really bad. What if every time he died, every time you killed that boss, this little window pops up with what he could possibly drop, and you can, every time he dies, you can put points toward that item that increase your RNG. And at any time, you can go spend the points. Let's roll it. See if I get it. So it's still up to you whether you go, I want to wait because I'll either not get anything at all or I'll get one of these other items. And let's say every time you spend points, there's a percentage next to that item and all the other items, and they change every time you put points in. So they start out as like 5% on every item, right? And then you go, okay, I got 5 points for beating this boss. This time, I'm going to put all 5 into this sword. Suddenly, that sword drop chance goes from 5% to 25%. And you go, I'm going to wait till next week and put 5 more points in so it jumps up to 50.
And as soon as you get the drop, all the points you've spent
go away. Yeah, they go away. And so you can do that until you can get it all the way up to 100 if you want. Yeah. But that takes more time.
And the rarer items, the points are worth less percentage value. So a common item, 1 point gives you a 10% chance. Yeah. An ultra rare item, 1 point gives you a 0.1% chance.
Exactly.
But it's still your choice.
And then how about this to even make it sweeter? What if there's still a small chance every time you die, every time the boss dies, that one of the items will just automatically go in your inventory at random? Just one of them. So you maybe go, okay, I've been putting points into the sword. You kill the boss, boom, sword goes in your inventory. You're like, sweet, refund points, put it on another item.
I liked a thing that old school RuneScape used to do, which was, let's say if I go and solo a boss and I kill the boss and I get the super rare sword drop, fantastic, I've got the super rare sword drop. Let's say I go with 5 people, me and 4 other people. If we kill the boss, does one of us get the sword drop? Well, no, they had a different system. If there were 5 people and the sword would actually drop, every member would get 20% of the sword in their inventory, like a little note that says this is 20%. And you couldn't sell it, you couldn't trade it, you couldn't do anything with it. All you could do is keep going as a group until your percentage was 100, and then you could give it to an item guy and he would give you the sword.
Does that exist already in a game?
Actually, yeah, it's great, because what I could do is I could camp there solo and get the drop myself, or I could camp there with 5 friends and we could finish the day and we could say, okay guys, we're all 35% toward the sword. The sword RNG chance was exactly the same, but every drop was divided equally among us. So it wasn't one person getting it and one person thinking, oh shit, I don't have it. You've got it, but I don't. It was all of us equally saying we are this much closer as a group to achieving it.
I like that. I like that a lot. I think that's very interesting because WoW kind of tries something with their protection where they go, hey, you get X amount of coins a week. And then every time you kill a boss, if you don't win something from the boss, you can spend the coin and get another chance of getting something. But again, it was RNG and what item you get if you did win something. Yep. And to try to make you feel better for not getting something, it would give you like a small bag of gold or something kind of useless. But I like that way what you just said. That sounds a lot better. Or the tree section I mentioned where you're like, I want this sword. At any time I can try to roll for it.
I'm just fine with having a currency method, right? So, like for example, and it's just like in real life. If I wanted to save up for a Lamborghini, I could, even though I don't have even though I don't have a great paying job. If I wanted to sacrifice certain aspects of my life and put aside $1,000 a month for the next 100 months, right? Like I could go ahead and buy that Lamborghini when Bill Gates could just go out right now and go buy the Lamborghini, right? Well, he chose a different path. He chose to get a more lucrative earning job, right? And so then there's a choice that becomes with that. Or I could enter into a contest entry and have a chance to win a Lamborghini.
Right.
Where
well,
me and Bill
essentially
Gates have
the way
equal
I
amount of
mentioned
chance.
and the way Final Fantasy 14 does it are almost the same. Like there's that level of protection of you will get the item
right.
no matter what. I think the only items that should ever be, if you do a currency to get items as a protection to bad luck, the only items that should never be available via currency are games like game breaking, change how you play your class type items. For example, like WoW had the gear sets that you had back in Wrath of the Lich King, you had bad luck protection for every other slot. You know, if you didn't win, you could go spend the valor you earned doing the dungeons and the raids to buy those items. But the 4 tier pieces, if you wanted them, you had to go through RNG to get them.
It seems that every choice we're making is leaning toward 2 specific things. Romagus is saying that if Bill Gates could buy a Lamborghini instantly, that's fine, but you also want the ability to save up for it. You are saying that you've got the same chance that he has to get it, you just want to be given the ability to work toward it, for it not to be totally random. And what we're also saying on top of that is we want the choice. You want the choice, Raziel, to be able to cash in your points that you're putting into this tree at any time to roll the dice to make the risk.
Right.
The 2 things that RNG take away from people are the ability to save up for something or the ability to choose whether you want to risk getting it or not. All of that agency is with the game. All of the agency is with the system that we don't see. So RNG, it seems, is mainly ruined by the fact that we as players cannot save up to beat it, and we can't choose when we take it on.
Yeah, I'd agree. Mm-hmm. And I just want to point out that to your chat, Josh, that yes, I did say doo-doo.
Yeah, I can see it there as well.
But no, I agree. I agree
to go back to the
completely.
Lamborghini example with me and Bill Gates, right? So like I could choose to use my resources to pay for a ticket for a contest entry, like a lottery ticket, to get the Lamborghini. And Bill Gates, obviously, since he has more resources, could buy more tickets and have a higher chance. I could still win the Lamborghini, and he could still just straight out buy it if he wanted to, or he could play the game. Maybe let's say it's a fundraiser, right? Let's say all the proceeds go towards mosquito nets in Africa, right? And so Bill Gates throws $1 billion in, and he ends up not winning the Lamborghini, but I do, right? Now, Bill Gates could feel miffed because he put so much effort, so much more resources into it than I did. But because the act of doing so, like he wasn't actually doing it for the Lamborghini, he was doing it for the mosquito nets, like that. Those resources.
Those are some expensive ass mosquito nets, man.
Right. Well, that's what his charity does. That's
okay.
That's
I know. I'm just giving you shit. But
how do you think this affects? And this is, again, what the chat is saying: soulbound versus non-soulbound items.
Get me
for those
started
people who
on
aren't entirely
soulbind,
sure what
man.
that is. Yeah, soulbound means your character, your avatar, has the item, can use the item, but cannot pass it to another player. And non-soulbound means they can be traded around. Now, in RuneScape, almost nothing is soulbound. In RuneScape, almost every single item, you can take it, you can equip it, you can use it, and when you're done with it, you sell it on. You stick it on the Grand Exchange, you sell it to another player, done, fine. You just throw it off. It doesn't lose its value too much. You use it, you pass it on. That does mean that when you get a super rare drop in RuneScape, you can stick it on the Grand Exchange for $1 billion, sell it for $1 billion, and buy everything you'll ever need for the rest of the game. Mm-hmm. In World of Warcraft, a lot of the stuff is soulbound. You get the drop, it's yours, you can't do anything with it. It does mean that you won't be able to sell it, but it also means that if you can't use it immediately, it's junk.
Well, they've kind of changed that a bit last time I played, which was 2 expansions ago, where if you get a soulbound item in a raid, you have like an hour or 2 hour window to trade it. Okay. But only to somebody who was in the raid with you.
Oh, in the raid. That's fine. That's
and I'm completely fine with that. I actually think soul binding an item is, if it serves a purpose, which it usually does, which is to restrict the economy, so nothing hyperinflation doesn't happen. And I'm fine with soul binding things. Which also adds to, like I know in WoW, every raid trash mobs could drop random BOEs. So bind on equip items, which weren't as good most of the time as the soulbind, but it was a way for a guild to make a little extra money. Hey, we got a couple BOEs. We're going to throw these up on the auction house so people can buy that don't raid and still get some epic gear. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm completely fine with that. Romagus, what do you think?
And that's a good way of adding in RNG because it's a nice little bonus that happens to you that improves your day but doesn't change your life.
Right.
I think RNG should be stuff that improves your day but doesn't change your life. Hey, here's a weapon that's got, 10% more damage, but it's easily outclassed. Here's a weapon that does, it's 1% faster, but this is, extremely rare and occasionally you're going to poison yourself with it.
Right.
As long as it doesn't change your life or your game, RNG seems fine because it's nice to have things randomly happen. It's nice for variation. It's nice for something unexpected to happen. But when it's important, when it's game-breaking or when it's endgame, unexpected things are bad.
It's only nice when it's pleasantly unexpected things. If unexpected bad things happen, that's not good.
Yeah.
Getting into a car wreck is not good.
Exactly.
And so if something like that happened, but I don't know, for me...
If you drove down the road and someone stopped you and a policeman flags you down and you pulls over and they say, hey, here's an ice cream. I'd be like, thanks. That's not.
I think at some point he's trying to poison me, man.
I'll carry on off now. But if they pull me to the side and say, hey, here's £10 billion, off you go, I'm going to be like, thanks, this does seem a little bit unfair on whoever you didn't choose, but thanks, this is great for me.
Right.
If they flag me down and say, you're going to jail for the rest of your life because you said something anti-China, I'd be like, hang on, I live in the UK, why is this happening?
Right.
But the idea is, if it's small, RNG is absolutely brilliant. If it's majorly life-changing, RNG makes everyone else feel terrible.
Right, and that's the thing. Is like, ask all the people right now that have COVID-19 if they feel lucky.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, and the people that died especially don't. So it's like... And that was all RNG. That was all random that they happen. I mean, not for everybody, but for a lot of people, they just happened to cross paths or just happened to touch something that was infected and had no idea because it's invisible. They can't see it.
Yep.
And they're screwed.
And now we are taking all the chances we can. We are trying to manipulate everything we possibly can to lower that chance. Human beings are saying, right, what agency have we got? What can we do? So when video games add RNG and they're like, whatever you do, no matter what chances you take, what changes you make, the numbers here will never change. It's just pure luck.
Yeah.
All the hardcore gamers that drop hours and hours and hours into it go,
well, fuck this then.
Well, that's shit.
I'm out. Yeah, no thanks.
But at the end of the day, though, it's your responsibility to choose to log in or not. It's not
sure.
The developers make the content, and you choose to purchase or not purchase.
It's your responsibility to decide if it's worth your time. And the bottom line is, though, is what a lot of developers are doing now, like what Josh said, is they're hiding the numbers where you don't know. You can't make that determination if it's worth your time until you go through it. Like the Division 2 is a perfect example where you're like, if something's this hard, if a piece of content is this hard, that means
in your Asheron's Call example, though, like it wasn't meant to be known how to create those spells, and so that whole thing ruined it. So they have to keep secrets to an extent, or else only the data miners have access to the game.
Absolutely. But like what Josh says, like we still need to have some level of control to manipulate our RNG, and if we don't, in my
opinion,
if it's gone, if everything is pure 100% luck, then the vast majority of the types of players that generally are attracted to MMOs are going to lose interest, and they're going to go away.
What happens when it becomes, because of the maths, only worth your time to do it? Let's say that
that's meta,
there's an item in the game that's game-breakingly powerful, and there's a 1 in 1,000 chance of getting the drop, and there's only one way to possibly get it, and if you get the drop, you will become effectively God in this game. No matter what else you do in the game, nothing will be as powerful as getting that drop, no matter how much time you spend. So RNG begins to suck when it's really unlikely to happen, and yet it's the only thing actually worth doing.
Well, and it goes back to internal validation again. Like, for example, I could get the Ultima weapon. I could, in Final Fantasy VII, I could get the ultimate weapon, make sure my HP is up all the way, always hit for a quad 9 every time, and easily, just rail through every single boss in the game. But a lot of and it goes back to the meta that we were talking about, there are a lot of speed runs. And a lot of the speed runs, they force you, because of the speed run, it forces you to forego all of these super powerful weapons, and it makes you think differently on how to get to the end of the game. To the point where some of these speedruns, they require glitches where it's just it boggles my mind how these guys figured out how to manually get into the debug room without being a developer themselves. Right? They found out.
Dude, never underestimate the power of guys on the internet, dude.
Yeah, they wait for this certain RNG mob placement, and then they know that the next fight that they do, as long as they win, that'll put them into the debug room. And once they're in the debug room, then they can manipulate the numbers in their favor.
Right. So
then they skip straight to the end of the game and then beat Final Fantasy VII within 2 hours.
It's crazy, man.
Yeah.
Well, and
so that's a whole. The developers never intended that. That's not the developer's fault. But there's this whole new game around Final Fantasy VII and speedrunning it, and all.
And
of
that's
these
completely
and
player
even
design
before
there.
speedrunning, there were certain types of playthroughs that you could do. So there's an initial equip, restricted playthrough where it says you can go throughout the entire game doing whatever you want, but you can't ever equip a better sword or piece of armor. You have to complete the game from beginning to end. And so this is where it comes into internal validation. Before, when I played Final Fantasy VII, I thought I was excellent at the game because I would spend 100 hours getting all the most difficult timed equipment to be able to roll through the last boss. But then I realized it took significant more brain power and strategy to defeat these bosses while handicapped. So to the point where people would go through and handicap themselves on purpose.
Self-created challenge.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the thing is like, I think that's really cool. And I get your point. The vast majority of people these days, I don't want to say they're not creative enough. I want to say that that's just not something they seek. They don't seek self-created challenge. They want the challenge provided for them.
Yeah. Instead of the challenge themselves.
Right. And which I wanted to get your guys' opinion. What do you think, because we're on the topic of RNG and items specifically, how do you feel about MMOs when they put an item in the game where only one copy of that item can ever exist in the game? Have you ever seen that?
I haven't personally seen it, but I'm not sure if I'm against it or not.
So in Assuran's Call, there was a suit of armor called the Nexus armor. It looked exactly like the Greater Shadow armor, and it essentially was the Greater Shadow armor where it couldn't drop. It just had a different color. It couldn't drop if you died. The only difference between it and the Greater Shadow armor was it was about twice as strong in its armor values and all its protection values. And only one suit in the game existed, and it only dropped one time because the boss that dropped it would only spawn in the world one time on that server. Each server had one. Whoever killed it got the loot, got the shard, got the next summer, never existed again. How do you feel about stuff like that?
The crazy thing is, that's not RNG. That sounds pretty cool, but we know that's going to happen. We know it's there. We know it's going to happen. We know that's there. So it actually isn't random. That would be, this is going to happen, first person to gets it wins. And everyone understands the rules.
True.
Everyone knows that's where you get it. That's where the drop comes. First person to get it gets there. If it was just the boss randomly spawned and we didn't know when and we didn't know where and we didn't know how, that would piss people off because there's no way of planning for it.
Right.
But I would actually be okay with that. I mean, the only example I can give is from RuneScape. There's these items called treasure trails. They're clues that lead you all around the world and potentially give you extremely rare items. And they put new items in. Some of the items are worth hundreds of millions of coins and they're purely cosmetic. You can't do anything with them. You just wear them.
Right.
And people will look and go, oh, there's only like 5 of those in the game. And you're like, yeah, I've got one. It's worth hundreds of millions of coins. It does nothing. It just looks nice.
Right.
I think rare things are fine as long as they aren't game breaking.
Right. And you brought up something really, really interesting, a thought in my mind, because there's been many times in games, and this is where RNG can piss people off even more, is let's say like the original Shadow Armor in Assurance Call was really a long process to get. And it was very RNG based if you got the drops off of these enemies to build. Well, there was one patch where they said Shadow Armor is kind of too strong. Its armor values are too high. It was too close to being as good as the Nexus armor. So they dropped the values down. It still had its innate function of you'll never lose this if you die, and it was still really good.
Yeah.
But they didn't want to piss people off, so they said, if you've made any Shadow Armor up to this patch, you get to keep your pre-patch armor. Just all the suits that are made after this patch will be a little weaker. So there was a whole economy of pre-patch GSA, post-patch GSA. And people that didn't even get to experience the pre-patch were even more pissed because they're like, I was farming to get Shadow Armor just as hard as the people who got it before the patch. I just wasn't as lucky to get the drops. So stuff like that.
What Magus was saying earlier,
pissed them off even more.
If you don't know something exists, you'd be fine with it.
Yeah.
And again, to me, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with because as long as there's other things you can do with the game, like there are people that just get fixated on these things that they shouldn't. It's psychologically unhealthy. If you're logging into a game and you're getting pissed about these things,
dude, 70% of what I do is psychologically unhealthy.
You need to recheck what you're doing. I'm okay. I'm okay with special armor like that. I'm also okay with unbeatable bosses. I like the idea of people trying, like with Absolute Virtue, people trying to figure out, and all of the things that come about, trying to figure out how to defeat a boss. And all the very creative ways. And what was funny in Final Fantasy XI and how Absolute Virtue was finally taken down was they put a Kraken Club on a monk who was subbing Dark Knight, which allowed, so monks, which are known for fighting with their fists, were fighting with a weapon that they normally wouldn't use, but because the Kraken Club had a chance to hit 8 times in a turn, then monks also had the ability called 100 Fists, which negated their attack delay, right? So they had so many, they could attack so many more times. And then Dark Knight had an ability where you could drain HP. So basically, a monk with a Kraken Club with the sub of Dark Knight was basically hitting the boss and getting that, and had a chance to get that much more HP back from the boss. So not only was it doing the most damage to the boss, but it was also tanking the boss, and the boss couldn't hit back. And so what people did is they just, let's get 8 monks that sub Dark Knight and then just have them swap. And so when the 100 Fists would run out on one monk, they put up the next monk, 100 Fists, Kraken Club, boom, 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 and they beat the unbeatable boss, right? So and the developers never expected that because the Kraken Club was such a low drop rate. They didn't think there would ever be a group of people that had 8 people that had 8 Kraken Clubs with 8 monks that sub Dark Knight, right? But that is a thing that happened, and the people figured it out. But if they wouldn't have ever created that unbeatable boss, that scenario would have never cropped up.
Yeah.
You talked earlier about self-imposed challenges. The idea that RNG doesn't matter too much if you're doing self-imposed challenges because you don't need to play the way everyone else does. And then you mentioned how Final Fantasy VII has this speedrun. And you're absolutely right. With self-imposed challenges, RNG might not matter too much because you're playing to your own rules and to your own styles, and you're trying to complete your own goals. But if you're playing a self-imposed challenge created by someone else, you will still have certain RNG methods that rely on it. I said that there will be there'll be a moment when RNG is so damn good if it happens that you need to do it. And then you mentioned about getting into the developer room in Final Fantasy VII. Yeah. That means that if you're doing the speed run, if you're doing that specific speed run, getting the RNG to get into the developer room is what you would try and get. Right. That is what you would try and do.
And that's what most of the speedrunners get frustrated about, right? Because they'll say, "Oh, my speed run was 2 minutes slower than this guy because this guy got the better RNG on the debug room."
Yeah,
and that's where it gets frustrating. Yeah.
Yes. The whole point of this is a lot of MMORPG players don't add in their own personal custom challenges until they've beaten what we'll call the main game, how the developers intended it to be played, how the majority of players are going to play it. And when you've got the majority of your player base playing the game the way that was kind of intended, there will be a random chance that something overpowered can happen, and it will be worth going for every time. And because of that, you'll get burnt out. People will say, hey, if you're playing the game as it's intended to be played, the best weapon is this. You have a 1% chance of getting it if you grind this dungeon. Therefore, you need to go and grind this dungeon the entire time. The RNG is now your god. You need to just hope this happens.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and tying it back in with what we have in our notes here, because Warlord brought this up. I know he was being a troll about it, but what do you guys feel about when RNG is involved in what content you can even do? So, for example, in Final Fantasy XIV, you do these roulettes, right? Where every day it's your dailies. What you do a random expert dungeon, which is random. You do a raid, which is random. There's been many cases where I've been frustrated and burnt out, and it's just small because I'm like, dude, I've done this daily every day for the last 2 weeks, and every day when I hit the random, Q button, I get the same dungeon over and over and over and over and over again. And I could just manually select another dungeon, but then I won't get the daily rewards because I picked the dungeon. I think that's really stupid.
I like it.
Randomizing queue thing. I think there should be a queue where you can go just random because you don't give a shit, but it shouldn't be tied to something you have to do.
Because there are parameters on that queue, right? So specifically with Final Fantasy XIV, with the expert dungeon, there's only 2 dungeons. It's either this dungeon or it's that dungeon. So it's a coin flip, right? And the reason why that's there is because people who haven't cleared it yet, that whole system is in place. And this is what's kind of frustrating of why they let groups, pre-made groups, do duty roulette, which I don't really get. Was the whole point of it was for someone who hasn't cleared the content yet, the whole idea of the duty, whole idea of the duty roulette was to get jobs to be incentivized to help people who haven't gone through the stuff yet.
Right. Which goes down to the core problem of, like I said,
so really
older content becoming irrelevant when new content comes out.
It's not really a roulette. It's not random. It's only random to you. It's actually putting you in a group of what somebody else needs. You just can't see what that other person needs. And for you, you're fine with it because you've already gone through it. You know how it works. And that helps you be able to be a leader to that person who hasn't. So in that specific event, when I do duty roulettes every day, I do it as a community service. I don't do it just for me. Like, oh, am I going to get this dungeon? There's no point. I can just go do that.
You're such a fucking hero, aren't you?
Well, but at the same time, for me, with the coin flip, I'm not angry or sad whether or not it's tails or heads because I never made a bet to begin with. I didn't put any effort in. I just knew, okay, when I flip this coin, it's going to be heads or tails. I didn't throw my life on the line. Like, oh my God, if it's heads, I'm going to have to shoot myself. Like that's not, I didn't put that bet beforehand.
Well, I'm putting that bot in there for you from now on, dude.
A perfect example, an interesting example of randomness within content that I think was done extremely well was Diablo 2 and 3. Now, in Diablo 2 and 3, whenever you went to a random rift, have you guys played Diablo 3?
I played 3 a lot, man, for like the first 6 seasons, I think.
When you went to any of the random dungeons that you could go to in Diablo 3, there was a very, very small chance you could go through a rift that would take you to the rainbow level, the kind of leprechauns and unicorns and rainbows, and that was so stupid, but at the same time great, because it was such a random chance of it happening, but it was nice and interesting and funny. So I love the idea of content sometimes being locked behind RNG, but not important content,
that makes sense,
necessary.
But did you
content.
know that rainbow happy level dropped the best loot? It had higher RNG for the best loot.
See, that now annoys me even more.
If the best loot in the game,
and now that you know, now your life is fucking ruined.
Yeah,
congratulations.
Now I know.
Razzle just ruined your fucking life.
I just shit all over everything, man.
He just shit in your cereal, man.
That means I'm just going to go into a random rift, and if it's not a rainbow land, just reset, and then just keep going until I get the rainbow one. They're like, now it's here.
Well, and then they did the rifts where you could get the goblin rifts, where you'd go in and you just all you'd hear is a bunch of goblins like making their noises, and you go around the corner and they're all just sitting there like a pile of goblins,
Yeah.
and loot goblins, and you just
and
holy
you
shit!
kill them all, and you have so much stuff.
It got so overpowered that that's what you were going for, getting RNG.
Yeah.
Is you'd be in a group. They had entire clans, like communities set up, where you'd be a part of this community. Yeah, and if you found a goblin rift, I found a rift. I have 3 spots available, and the first 3 people would hurry and join on your team, and then you go kill them. And that's an example. All RNG.
That's an example of a pleasant thing where, it's the prime reason behind the phrase, "This is why we can't have nice things," right? The developers decided to put like a nice little thing in there, and then the people get it. And now, because of bad psychology, because they're being denied this pleasant thing, they now have to ruin the pleasant thing. Not only for themselves, but for everyone else.
It's an overpowered thing.
Yeah.
That it's worthwhile to do it. And it's not worthwhile to do anything else because...
Right, now we're getting into the whole meta conversation again.
Good.
Well, again, because worthwhile, I mean, we're sitting here on our asses in front of a computer screen with a controller or a keyboard and mouse on our hand.
Fuck you, man. You don't know me. You don't know me.
Saving the UK from Corona. This is what my government tells me to do.
I'm being responsible, man. I'm social distancing, motherfucker. Trying to shame me.
Mom.
Trying to house shame me, mom.
Playing video games. All our parents were like, playing video games won't prepare you for the real world.
Yeah. Look at
that. Bullshit, mom.
Bullshit.
In your
face. That is funny.
Dad.
Yeah, I know this is an aside, but that is interesting how it's like, I know my parents would think, you're never going to get anywhere playing video games. Now, they're right in my instance, but for other people, I mean, there's people making millions and millions and millions of dollars. It's the largest industry. It's the largest entertainment industry right now. It
is. Video games are the biggest entertainment industry in the world.
Exactly.
Let's talk about random number generation. Let's talk about Twitch's algorithm of who they recommend and who they don't.
YouTube.
Is that random? I thought that was highly...
I think it's based on certain parameters that you're able to change. YouTube have a very random algorithm.
YouTube's is very random. Twitch's is how much of your breasts can I see?
No, I think it's how much money they can make you.
Which is related to how much of your breasts can I see?
Yeah. I'm going to get my girl... As soon as I'm streaming seriously, my girlfriend is going to sit here next to me the whole time.
That's why my wife left me, man. I'm just kidding. That's not why.
But RNG within MMORPGs, I'm pretty sure that we're all annoyed at just because it's a system totally beyond our reach. When I'm playing as my character, my avatar in the game is, I feel like God to them. I tell them where to go. I tell them what to equip. Right. I tell them what to do. Their life is in my hands. As soon as any aspect of their life is removed from my power, I'm sat there thinking, this isn't the deal I made with you, game. The deal I made is I would control you. You would do what I say. Why is that guy way richer than I am through pure luck? I'm annoyed about that in real life. I don't want to be annoyed about it in game.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I agree. No, I agree completely. I mean, I think that's what the biggest thing is we finally, to sum everything up, because we've gone almost 2.5 hours now, but to sum everything up, RNG becomes the most frustrating and the most punishing when we lose all control over how it takes place, and if we can alter it at all. And if something is 100% luck, it kills things for people. It kills enjoyment, because unless you're an addicted gambler, unless you're just totally into that, which I don't think most people are. I think there's a direct correlation with the massive subscription drops from World of Warcraft. And when they started stacking RNG on RNG on RNG with their legendary system, with Titan Forging, with War Forging, that's when everything started going downhill, man. Like, where people just said, I'm done. Like, I can't, like, I'm not doing this anymore. It's a gambling game and I'm not having fun. You know, that's...
Well, nothing given has ever been gained, right? From nothing given is nothing gained. So I think the metaphor for Blizzard, I mean, look, it was like you said, none of the guys who made the game are working on the game anymore. It's the same company, but it's a completely different company.
Right.
Just
in
with
fact,
the same
on
name.
that note, Romagus, there was a direct quote from one of the guys that worked on the original WoW, and he said, "You know, if you're a developer of an MMO, you know your game has failed if it becomes a timer." And he was using the Ultima Online example. He goes, "If your game becomes a set a timer before you play a game." He goes, and he was referring to dailies. He was making fun of WoW's daily system. He said, if there's ever a limit to what you can do, and it's always revolving around RNG and stuff like that, and you can literally set a timer, okay, this is what I have to get done today. Once I do that, I'm done for the day. I can gain nothing else anymore after this point in time. Like once I complete these things, there's nothing else I can do that day or that week. He goes, once you can set a calendar to be completely efficient in a game, your game has failed. About MMOs is what he said essentially. And he was part of Blizzard North, the company that made the first 3 parts of WoW, Diablo 1, Diablo 2, StarCraft 1, Warcraft 1 through 3. It was a really extremely awesome interview. I'll have to see if I can track it down and I'll share it with you guys. But he was shitting all over Blizzard in the interview.
Dailies are a perfect example of how the companies actually don't want you to work hard. When people say, I worked hard, I got to where I am. Well, if you want to work hard in a game, you should be able to continue doing everything you want to do repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly. That is the hard work.
Right.
If they set a hard limit on when your hard work starts and stops, then you're not actually working hard. You're working just as much as the game wants you to and thinks you should be.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a whole other issue. Maybe that's we should have another podcast.
Dailies can be a whole show. We'll talk about
on
dailies
and that kind of thing. I'd be totally down with that.
Yeah, sounds interesting.
But anyway, let's wrap it up. So what are your final thoughts for Magus?
Yeah, I still feel the same way about RNG. Again, all the aspects that we had, like, I never really got that feeling of winning the lottery when I finally got that item I got. Like I'm always just the kind of guy. It's like, hey, that costs $3.99. Cool. I will pay you $3.99 and then I will have that thing. Until I get my $3.99, I don't get that thing. So what I got to do is I got to work up to $3.99. Then I can have that thing. It all seems fine to me. And to an extent, like what Warlord just mentioned in the chat, Party Finder is RNG. And that's where MMOs, I think, are RNG enough, right? When I have to deal with other people, those I can't control what they're doing. I can't put my faith that they're always going to be 100% efficient most of the time, right? Yeah. But I can enjoy their company. I can enjoy the randomness of their company, but everything else about the game doesn't need to be random in any way, shape, or form. You just need to include more things to make it seem like it's random.
Right.
But to actually include randomness into it is unnecessary to me.
Yeah. Okay. I can respect that. What about you, Josh? What are your final thoughts?
Random number generation is a game mechanic. The ability to create a number from a minimum to a maximum value is just another part of a video game. And as a video game player, I am always of the opinion that a player should have agency over as many mechanics as possible, or at least the ability to manipulate those mechanics to a certain degree. So generating a random number is fine. If you want me to respect that random number or even enjoy that number, give me the ability to affect the range it can go to and from. If I have no agency and no power over it, I'm going to dislike it. Allow me to control where the range is, and if it doesn't go my way, if I don't get the number I want, give me a consolation prize, and once I've got enough consolation prizes, let me get the thing I want anyway.
Yeah.
That way I'm taking small steps to get closer to what I want, and I feel like I'm in charge of what's happening.
I can respect that.
I think I 100% echo your sentiments. I mean, that's exactly how I feel. I think RNG becomes, there should always only be one layer, never more. You should never stack layers of RNG on top of each other. Because it gets gratuitous, it gets mundane, and it gets frustrating. And one thing I didn't mention is RNG should never be a substitute for engaging content. Like that's Modern WoW is a perfect example of that, where it's, hey, if we throw in as much RNG as possible, it'll keep people around. And turns out they were wrong. So anyway, but yeah, I totally agree. The more control I have over what my odds are going to be, I'm fine, because then you still feel like you're progressing. You still feel like you're taking steps towards your ultimate goal, as opposed to I could reach my goal today or I could never reach it. That's when I get frustrated.
Yeah.
But anyway, guys, thanks so much to everybody in my chat, you goddamn trolls, and in in Josh's chat. I've been keeping an eye. Thank you very so much for coming and watching. Again, all of our information where you can follow and rewatch this if you want is here on our on the stream. If it's not posted up on Josh's and you're in Josh's, you can look at mine. It'll be up there. You can go to his videos too, and they'll be there after he closes it. But Romagus and I posted on our YouTube channel as well within a day or two after we're done. So if you missed it, the whole thing, and you want to watch it, come watch it. We're going to be back next week. Josh, we're going to try to have you on as often as you can. I think we get a lot more, as often as you're willing, we get a lot more bouncing around and more fresh ideas than when it's just Romagus and I talking at each other, because we do that all the time anyway.
I'm following my government's advice of sitting right here and playing video games.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So if we have a topic we feel you'll have a good insight on that relates, we'll pull you in, man, if you're willing.
Absolutely, mate. As often as you want.
Sweet. So everybody, if you're in my chat, make sure you give Josh a follow on his Twitch, and you sub to him on YouTube. Show him some support.
The same for my guys going to you, right?
Yeah, same with Romagus, guys. Hook him up.
And Romagus, go and
pay attention, because we're going to be doing a lot more content. Especially there are some MMOs coming out relatively soon. New World is coming out. The beta is this month, which if it still comes out this month, the whole COVID thing might delay it. I will be streaming it because there's no NDA, completely free to stream. So I will be streaming New World when it comes up, just to give it a chance. And I'm gonna know live Final Fantasy VII Remake here in a couple of days. So, but everybody stay safe, wash your goddamn hands, follow the rules, do the law. I don't want people getting sick. And everybody play video games and have fun. Support your streamers and your content creators. But as always, my friends, keep it real. You guys have any closing remarks other than that?
I'll be doing a 24-hour stream tomorrow, 5 p.m. PST to 5 p.m. PST on Saturday. So come around anytime. If you come during the witching hour, that helps me stay awake.
It's bitching. I went to one of his streams once, and I heard him snore for like an hour and a half. It was a good time.
24-hour streams are tough. I've done a few, and when you get to that 17, 18-hour mark,
that's the trick.
Your eyes are closing.
16,
no matter what's happening in the game.
I've never attempted one because I'm 37 and I know I wouldn't last.
As soon as the sun's out, everything's fine. But
do it as soon as you wake up. It's not like don't be awake for 8 hours and then start. You literally wake up, your breakfast is there, and you're playing. You've got to do it.
I think my longest stream ever was like 11 hours, and that almost killed me. So I'm 24, no thanks. But Josh, what else you got? You got anything? You streaming right after this, I imagine? Or are you going to bed?
I'm going to bed, but I'm thinking, since Ramey just said 24-hour stream, I'm thinking we find an MMO or a game that we all play. I'm thinking we find a time that we're all free, and I'm thinking we see if all three of us can do a 24-hour joint stream.
Oh, shit, dude. You're laying down the law now, huh? The gauntlets came down, Romagus.
I've done it multiple times.
Let's try.
I've failed a few times, but I've done it multiple times, so I'm down. I'm down whenever you want.
Yeah, if we can all pick a game and we can do a 3-way stream, man, that would be fun. It would be ideally be cool to do like an MMO where we can all like start at level 1 and level together at the same time.
Finish Diablo 3 and see how high we can get in 24 hours.
Oh man, that we might have to. Romagus, do you have Diablo 3?
All right.
I do not, but I can get it.
I'll see what we can do anyway. I'll keep it in mind. I'll see what we can do.
We'll figure it out. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Keep it real and stay safe out there, you sons of bitches.